7 years ago, the woman I was about to marry left me for my rich brother. Today, at our father's funeral, my brother strutted in with her, all shine and smug. She leaned in. "So, I guess I won, right? You are still poor." I calmly said, "Yeah? Well, meet my wife." She froze. The rain came down in sheets the morning they buried our father, not the gentle kind that taps politely on umbrellas and whispers against window panes. This was the angry sort, the kind that drowns out eulogies and turns cemetery grass into mud that clings to your shoes like regret. I stood there under a black umbrella that did almost nothing, watching the water pool in the carved letters of my father's name on the mahogany casket, and I thought, of course it would rain today. My father would have found that funny, in his own quiet way. He always said the weather had a sense of timing. There weren't many people there. My father had been a small man who lived a small life. Not small in the diminishing sense, but in the intentional one. He'd been a middle school math teacher for 43 years. He wore the same brown cardigan every autumn. He read the newspaper with breakfast and did crossword puzzles in pen. He never raised his voice, never asked for much, never tried to be anything other than exactly who he was. And he'd loved both his sons, even though one of them had spent the last 7 years pretending he didn't exist. I watched the priest's mouth move, forming words I couldn't hear over the drumming rain. My suit was soaked through. I could feel water trickling down my spine, cold and insistent, but I didn't move, didn't shift. I just stood there, one hand gripping the umbrella handle, the other buried deep in my pocket where my fingers had found the smooth edge of my wedding ring. Focus on that, I told myself. Focus on what's real. But then I heard it. The sound of tires on wet pavement. Expensive tires. The kind that don't screech. They purr. I didn't need to turn around to know what was coming. I could feel it in the way the air changed, in the sudden stiffening of my mother's shoulders beside me, in the almost imperceptible pause the priest made before continuing his eulogy. My brother had arrived. The car door opened with the soft, hydraulic hush of German engineering. Then another door. Footsteps on gravel, her heels clicking in that precise, measured way I used to find elegant and now just found calculated. I kept my eyes on the casket, on the rain beating and rolling off its polished surface. "Sorry we're late." My brother's voice cut through the weather, loud enough to ensure everyone heard. Not apologetic, never apologetic. Just the performance of apology, the way you'd perform gratitude when someone compliments a gift you bought yourself. Traffic was insane. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was. I'd driven my 12-year-old Honda here at 6 in the morning, specifically to avoid traffic. But Marcus wouldn't know anything about that. Marcus hadn't driven himself anywhere in years. The priest stumbled slightly over his words, something about eternal rest and God's grace. And I finally let myself look. Marcus stood at the back of the small gathering, somehow managing to make a funeral look like a networking event. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, probably cost more than my monthly rent. His watch caught what little light filtered through the clouds, some Swiss thing with complications I didn't understand and didn't care to. His hair was professionally styled to look casually tousled, the kind of look that takes effort to achieve but is meant to suggest effortlessness. And beside him, under an umbrella that matched her dress, was Emma. 7 years. It had been 7 years since I'd seen her in person, though I'd seen plenty of photos. Social media had made sure of that. Emma at charity galas. Emma at resort openings. Emma on yachts, whose names were puns about wealth. She'd aged well, or rather, she'd had the resources to ensure she aged imperceptibly. Her skin still had that porcelain quality. Her hair still fell in those perfect auburn waves. Her figure still made expensive clothes look even more expensive. She looked exactly like the woman I'd wanted to marry, and nothing like the woman I'd thought she was. Our eyes met across the grave, across the rain, across 7 years of silence. She smiled, not warmly, not sadly, just smiled, The way you smile when you run into an old acquaintance you've outgrown and want them to know it. The priest finished. People began the awkward shuffle of a funeral's end, the not knowing whether to approach the family or slip away quietly, the strange mathematics of grief and social obligation. My mother turned to me, her face a careful mask I'd learned to read over these past few years. "You should go wait in the car," she said softly. "I'll handle—" "I'm fine, Mom." "Daniel." "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. But I was going to stand there anyway because that's what you do. You stand. You endure. You don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you run. Marcus approached first, of course. He always led. Emma followed a half step behind, the way she used to follow me when we'd walk through crowded restaurants. I used to think it was because she liked me leading. I realized later it was just strategic positioning. She was always watching, always calculating, always ready to shift direction if a better path presented itself. "Dan," Marcus said, extending his hand, like we were colleagues, like he hadn't missed our father's last 3 birthdays, his hospitalization, his final lucid moments. "It's been too long." I looked at his hand, looked at his face, looked at the Rolex that probably cost more than our father's entire estate. I shook his hand, briefly, firmly. "Let go." "Marcus," I said, just his name, nothing else. The silence stretched. Rain filled it, and the distant sound of traffic, and the whisper of Emma's dress as she shifted her weight from one expensive heel to the other. "I'm sorry I couldn't be here more," Marcus continued, his voice taking on that tone of practiced regret. "The business, you know." Dad understood. He always understood how demanding. "He asked for you," I said quietly. At the end, 3 times. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I was in Singapore. I couldn't just—" "I know. You were busy." I turned to Emma then, really looked at her for the first time. "Emma, you look well." "Daniel," she said my full name, not the Dan she used to whisper when we were alone. "Thank you. You look different." Different. That was diplomatic. What she meant was, you look older, tired, like the years haven't been kind, like you've been working hard for modest results while we've been collecting art in Santorini. "Marriage agrees with you," I said, and watched her smile widen slightly, sensing victory in every word. "It does," she agreed, then lowering her voice just enough to create intimacy, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "I was worried, you know, after everything, worried you'd be okay. But look at you, still here, still standing, still doing your thing with those computers, right?" "IT consulting," I confirmed. "Small business systems, mostly local stuff." "That's wonderful," she said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "It's important work. Someone has to do it." Someone has to do it. Like it was charity work. Like I was teaching finger painting to toddlers instead of running a successful consulting firm that had tripled its revenue in 3 years. Marcus checked his watch, the gesture of a busy man indulging the less fortunate. "We should probably head out soon. I've got a call with Tokyo at 3. "Of course," Emma said. Then she turned to me fully, and her eyes glittered with something that wasn't quite malice, but wasn't quite kindness either. Something in between. Something satisfied. "So," she said, and I could feel it coming, could feel the knife she'd been sharpening for 7 years. "I guess I won, right?" The words hung there. She leaned in slightly, close enough that I could smell her perfume, different from what she used to wear, more expensive, applied with the confidence of someone who'd never worry about price tags. "You're still poor," she added almost gently, like she was breaking bad news, like she was concerned. My mother's hand found my arm, gripping tight, a warning, a plea. Don't engage, don't sink to her level, don't give them anything they can use against you. I looked at Emma, really looked at her, at this woman I'd wanted to build a life with, At this woman who'd chosen a bank account over a heart. At this woman who thought winning meant having more money and losing meant having less. I thought about the last 7 years, thought about the nights I'd spent angry, hurt, betrayed. Thought about the therapy sessions, the long talks with friends, the slow, painful process of building myself back up from the ruins of what I thought my life was supposed to be. I thought about Sarah, and I smiled. Not the tight, bitter smile of someone pretending to be okay. Not the forced smile of social obligation, a real smile, the kind that comes from somewhere true. "Yeah," I said calmly, pulling my hand from my pocket, the hand with the ring. "Well, meet my wife." I turned slightly, extending my other hand toward the woman who'd been standing quietly to my left the entire time. The woman who'd driven here with me at 6 in the morning, who'd held my hand during the service, who'd let me cry the night before while going through my father's old photo albums. The woman Emma hadn't even noticed. Sarah stepped forward, and I watched Emma's face do something complicated. Confusion first, then recognition, then a slow draining of color that had nothing to do with the gray light of the rainy morning. Because Sarah wasn't some random woman I'd picked up to make my ex-fiancé jealous. Sarah was Sarah Chen, Dr. Sarah Chen, as in the Sarah Chen whose biotech startup had just been acquired by a pharmaceutical giant for an amount of money that made headlines. The Sarah Chen who'd been featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 3 years running. The Sarah Chen who'd given a TED Talk on medical innovation that had 17 million views. The Sarah Chen who, despite all of that, still drove a sensible Subaru and preferred hiking to galas and thought my father's dad jokes were actually funny. Emma's mouth opened slightly, closed, opened again. Sarah smiled warmly and extended her hand because Sarah was gracious in ways I was still learning to be. "Emma, right?" Sarah said. "I've heard so much about you. I'm so sorry for Daniel's loss. He and his father were very close." She froze. Emma actually froze. Her hand half raised to accept Sarah's, her entire body gone still like a deer that just heard a twig snap in the forest. Marcus recovered first. Of course he did. He stepped forward with his business smile, the one he used for clients and cameras. "Dr. Chen," he said smoothly, "I didn't realize you'd be here. I read about the acquisition. Congratulations. Brilliant work you're doing." "Thank you," Sarah said simply, shaking his hand and then withdrawing, stepping back to my side, where she belonged. Though I should mention, it's still Sarah. I never liked the title outside the lab. Her hand found mine, squeezed gently. Emma was staring at our joined hands like they were a math problem she couldn't solve. I could almost see her brain working, recalculating, trying to figure out how this had happened, how I had happened to end up with someone like Sarah. "I didn't know you'd gotten married," Emma said finally, her voice smaller than before. "I hadn't heard." "We kept it small," I said. "Family only." "Well," I glanced at Marcus. "Family who showed up." The rain kept falling. The priest was talking to my mother near the cars. Somewhere in the distance I could hear traffic on the highway, the ordinary sounds of a world that kept moving regardless of grief or triumph or the small bitter satisfactions of watching someone realize they'd miscalculated. "We should let you get to your call," Sarah said to Marcus, her voice kind but final. "We're taking Daniel's mother to lunch. Family time." She emphasized the last 2 words ever so slightly. "Right," Marcus said. "Of course. Mom," he called out, but our mother had already turned away, heading to my Honda with a purposefulness that needed no translation. Emma was still staring at me, at us, at the rain that was ruining her designer dress and the mud that was destroying her expensive shoes. "Daniel," she started. "It was good to see you, Emma," I said, and I meant it, because standing there, with Sarah's hand in mine and my father being lowered into the ground and the rain washing everything clean, I realized something. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't hate Marcus anymore. I didn't feel much of anything toward them at all, except maybe a distant kind of pity and a closer kind of gratitude. Because if Emma hadn't left me 7 years ago, I never would have met Sarah. I never would have become the person I needed to be to deserve someone like Sarah. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing. You just can't see it until the rain stops. "Come on," Sarah said softly, tugging my hand. "Your mom's waiting." We walked away, together, leaving Marcus and Emma standing there in the downpour, still frozen, still trying to process what had just happened. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Behind me, I heard Emma's voice, thin and confused. "But he was poor. He was nobody. How did he—" I couldn't hear Marcus's response. Didn't want to. We reached the car where my mother stood waiting, and she looked at me with eyes that held 7 years of worry, finally releasing. "Are you okay?" she asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. "Yeah, Mom," I said. "I really am." And for the first time in 7 years, it wasn't a lie. The diner my mother chose was the same one my father had taken us to every Sunday morning for 20 years. It sat on a corner lot 3 blocks from the house I grew up in, wedged between a laundromat and a hardware store that somehow still survived, despite the Home Depot that had opened 2 miles away. The sign outside, red neon letters spelling Rosie's with the apostrophe burned out since 2003, flickered in the gray afternoon light. The windows were fogged with steam from the kitchen, and through them, I could see the familiar red vinyl booths, the black and white checkered floor, the counter where old men sat, nursing coffee and arguing about sports teams that hadn't been good since the 80s. Sarah pulled into the parking lot behind my Honda, and we sat there for a moment, engines ticking as they cooled, rain drumming on the roof. "You okay?" Sarah asked, her voice soft in the sudden quiet. I realized I was gripping the steering wheel hard enough that my knuckles had gone white. I forced my hands to relax, flexed my fingers. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Ask me after coffee." She smiled at that, the small, understanding smile that had first made me realize I was falling in love with her. We'd been in a hospital cafeteria at 2 in the morning. She'd been explaining protein synthesis, and I'd been pretending to understand, and she'd smiled exactly like that when I'd finally admitted I was completely lost. Not a mocking smile, not a superior smile, just kind. "Coffee solves most things," she said, "and if it doesn't, there's always pie." My mother was already out of her car, standing under the diner's awning, and shaking out her umbrella with the practiced efficiency of a woman who'd spent 40 years teaching high school English. She saw us watching and gestured impatiently. "Come on, I didn't raise you to sit in cars when there's shelter available." The bell above the door chimed when we entered, the same bell that had announced our arrival every Sunday of my childhood. The smell hit me immediately. Coffee, bacon grease, maple syrup, something baking in the back. Smells that meant safety, meant routine, meant a time when the biggest problem in my life was whether to get pancakes or French toast. "Martha," a voice called from behind the counter. Rosie herself, 70-something, built like she'd been carved from granite, hair dyed an improbable shade of burgundy. "Honey, I'm so sorry about Jack. He was a good man." My mother's face did something complicated. She'd been holding it together all morning, through the service and the burial and the confrontation I knew she'd witnessed, even though she'd pretended not to. But Rosie's kindness cracked something. "He really was," Mom said, her voice thick. "He really was, Rosie." Rosie came around the counter, something I'd rarely seen her do, and pulled my mother into a hug. They stood there for a long moment, 2 women who'd known each other for decades, who'd watched each other's children grow up, who understood loss in the way you only can when you've lived long enough to accumulate it. "Usual booth?" Rosie asked when they finally separated. Mom nodded. "Please." We settled into the booth at the back, the one by the window that looked out onto the small parking lot. The same booth where my father used to sit and do the crossword puzzle while waiting for our food. The same booth where Marcus and I used to fight over who got to sit by the window until Dad made us alternate weeks. The same booth where, 14 years ago, I'd told my parents I'd gotten accepted to college, and my father had cried, actually cried, with pride. The vinyl was cracked in places, repaired with duct tape that had been painted to match. The table had water rings and coffee stains that decades of wiping hadn't quite erased. Everything was worn and familiar, and exactly where it was supposed to be. "Your usual?" Rosie asked me, pulling out her order pad even though I was certain she'd already memorized what we were going to say. "Please. And for you, honey?" She turned to Sarah with the warm suspicion of someone meeting their regular customer's new partner for the first time. "What's good?" Sarah asked, and I loved her a little more for not pulling out her phone to check reviews, for not asking about organic options or gluten-free alternatives, for just asking. "Everything," Rosie said matter-of-factly. "But the meatloaf's fresh today, and the apple pie's still warm." "Sold," Sarah said, closing her menu. "Both, please." Rosie's eyes crinkled with approval. She looked at my mother, then at me, then at Sarah, and something knowing passed across her face. "Coffee all around?" she asked. "Please," we chorused. She left, and silence settled over the table. Not the awkward kind, just the quiet that comes when people who care about each other are catching their breath. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. A car pulled in, and I tensed instinctively, but it was just someone picking up a takeout order. "So," my mother said finally, wrapping her hands around the coffee mug Rosie had materialized without me noticing. "That was quite the scene at the cemetery." I felt my face heat. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make a scene at Dad's." "Don't you dare apologize." Her voice was sharp enough to cut. "Don't you dare, Daniel. That woman—" She stopped herself, took a breath. When she continued, her voice was calmer, but no less fierce. "That woman doesn't get to show up after 7 years and talk to you like that. And your brother—" She couldn't finish, just shook her head. Sarah's hand found mine under the table, squeezed gently. "I should have warned you we were coming," my mother continued. "Marcus called this morning, said he'd made arrangements to fly in. I told him the service time, and he said—" Her voice took on a mocking tone. "He said he'd try to make it work with his schedule. Like his father's funeral was a dentist appointment he might squeeze in between meetings." "He made it," I said neutrally. "He made it late. He made it with her. He made it in a car that cost more than your father's last 5 years of salary." Mom's knuckles were white around her coffee mug. "And he stayed for all of 15 minutes before checking his watch, like he had somewhere better to be." I'd never heard my mother talk about Marcus like this. She'd always been scrupulously fair, even when it was clear he was pulling away from the family, even when he stopped coming to holidays, even when he married Emma in a ceremony we weren't invited to. "Mom, no, let me say this. I need to say this." She looked at me directly, her eyes red but dry. "Your father, in the hospital, those last days, you were there, every day. You rearranged your entire work schedule. You slept in that horrible chair. You were there when he was lucid and when he wasn't. You read him the newspaper. You did the crossword puzzles with him. You were there." "Of course I was there," I said quietly. "He's my dad." "Exactly." She reached across the table, gripped my hand hard. "You were there because that's who you are. And Marcus wasn't there because that's who he's become. And I need you to know, your father knew. He knew exactly who his sons were. And he was so proud of you, Daniel. So proud." My throat felt tight. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "And Sarah—" Mom turned to her, and I saw Sarah straighten slightly, probably nervous about what was coming. "I know we just met, and this isn't exactly ideal circumstances, but I need to thank you. Daniel's told me how much you've helped him these past few months, coming with him to visit his father, just being there. That means everything. He talked about you constantly, Sarah said softly. Your father. Every time we visited, he'd tell me stories about teaching, about you and Jack meeting in a library, about the boys when they were little. He was a wonderful storyteller. Mom smiled for the first time all day. He was, wasn't he? Could make a trip to the grocery store sound like an epic adventure. The food arrived then, plates of comfort and nostalgia, my usual burger, medium rare, extra pickles, fries so crispy they shattered when you bit them, Sarah's meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans that had been cooked to within an inch of their life, Mom's club sandwich cut into perfect triangles the way Rosie had been cutting them for 20 years. We ate in silence for a while, and it felt good, felt normal, like maybe the world could still contain normal things despite everything. Can I ask you something? Mom said eventually, looking at Sarah. And please know you don't have to answer if it's too personal. Sarah nodded. Of course. How did you two meet? Daniel's been frustratingly vague about the details. I felt myself blush. Sarah laughed, that genuine, unself-conscious laugh that still surprised me every time I heard it. It's not a very romantic story, Sarah said. At least, not in the traditional sense. Those are usually the best kind, Mom said. Sarah glanced at me, asking permission. I nodded. I was having issues with the network at my lab, Sarah began. This was about 3 years ago, when we were still tiny, just me and 4 other people working out of a barely converted warehouse space. Our entire data system kept crashing and we couldn't figure out why. We'd already lost a week of experiment results and we were hemorrhaging money we didn't have. And you called my company, I supplied. I called 6 companies, Sarah corrected. You were the only one who could come that day. Everyone else wanted to schedule me out 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But you... She turned to me, and there was something in her eyes that made my chest feel warm. You showed up at 7:30 on a Friday night, stayed until 3 in the morning, tracking down the problem. Faulty backup protocol, I said. Someone had configured the automatic saves wrong. Easy fix once you found it. Easy for you, maybe. Impossible for us. Sarah turned back to my mother. He saved months of research, maybe the entire company, and when I asked how much I owed him, he charged me the standard 4-hour minimum, even though he'd been there for almost 8 hours. You were a startup, I said, embarrassed. I wasn't going to price gouge someone trying to cure diseases. See, Mom said to Sarah, he gets that from his father. Jack would give his students free tutoring on weekends, buy school supplies out of his own pocket for kids who needed them. Drove me crazy sometimes how generous he was. Anyway, Sarah continued, I insisted on buying him dinner, as a thank you. We went to this 24-hour diner near the lab. Worse than this place, if you can imagine, I interjected. Much worse. The coffee tasted like someone had strained it through an old sock. But we talked for 3 hours. About his work, my work, about why we did what we did. And I remember thinking, she paused, smiled. I remember thinking I'd just met the most genuinely decent person I'd encountered in years. I thought she was out of my league, I admitted. Completely absurdly out of my league. You asked me out anyway, Sarah said. 6 weeks later, after you'd fixed our system another 4 times, and I'd run out of excuses to keep calling you for tech support that we probably didn't actually need. Mom laughed. A real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard since before Dad got sick. And you said yes, Mom said to Sarah. I said yes, Sarah confirmed. Best decision I ever made. We fell into silence again, but it was a comfortable one now, filled with the clink of silverware and the murmur of other conversations and the hiss of the grill from the kitchen. Emma didn't know, I said finally, about Sarah, about any of it. I gathered, Mom said dryly. Her face when you introduced Sarah was, well, I'd feel bad for her if I was a more charitable person. She thought I'd been pining, I continued. Thought I'd spent 7 years miserable and alone and pathetic, waiting for her to realize she'd made a mistake. Were you? Mom asked gently. At first? I thought about it honestly. Yeah, at first. For maybe the first year. I was angry and hurt, and I didn't understand how she could choose money over what we had, or what I thought we had. And then, Sarah asked. She knew most of this story, but not all of it. Some things were still hard to talk about. And then I started therapy, I said. Started actually dealing with it instead of just being angry. Started building my business instead of just surviving. I looked at Sarah. Started being open to the idea that maybe what I'd lost wasn't actually what I wanted. That maybe Emma leaving was the universe doing me a favor I was too stubborn to see. The universe works in weird ways, Rosie said, appearing to refill our coffee. She'd obviously been listening, but I didn't mind. Rosie had earned the right to eavesdrop. My first husband left me for a waitress from the truck stop off Route 9, devastated me. Thought my life was over. Then 6 months later, I met Frank. Turned out the waitress did me the biggest favor of my life. How's Frank? Mom asked. Still ornery, still thinks he can beat me at poker. Rosie winked. Still wrong. She moved on to the next table, and I watched my mother watching her, something contemplative in her expression. Your father and I almost didn't make it, Mom said quietly. Did you know that? I blinked. What? Before you were born. We'd been married about a year. He wanted to stay in teaching. I wanted him to go into administration. Better money, better hours, better everything. I thought he was wasting his potential. We fought about it for months. She stirred her coffee absently. I even packed a bag once. Was going to leave, go stay with my sister until he came to his senses. What happened? Sarah asked. He let me pack. Didn't try to stop me. Just sat on the bed and said, Martha, if you need me to be someone else to make you happy, then I'm not the right person for you. But I know who I am. I'm a teacher. That's what I'm supposed to do. And I really hope that's enough. She smiled sadly. I unpacked that bag. Took me another year to really understand what he meant. But eventually I got it. He wasn't wasting potential. He was being exactly who he was supposed to be. And that was enough, I said softly. More than enough. Mom looked at me directly. Emma wanted you to be Marcus. She wanted the money, the status, the life she thought she deserved. And when she met someone who already had those things, she jumped ship. It hurt you, and that hurt me, and that hurt your father. But Daniel, her voice was fierce now, she did you the biggest favor she could have possibly done. Because you're not Marcus. You're not supposed to be Marcus. You're supposed to be you. I felt Sarah's hand squeeze mine under the table. And you? Mom turned to Sarah. You saw him. The real him. Not the potential him, or the could-be him, or the should-be him. Just him. That's... Her voice cracked slightly. That's what Jack saw in me. And I'm so grateful Daniel found someone who sees him the same way. He makes it easy, Sarah said simply. He's kind of impossible not to see. We finished our meal in comfortable silence, the kind families settle into when the hard things have been said and all that's left is being together. The pie came, warm apple with vanilla ice cream melting into the crevices, and we shared it 3 ways using forks that had been in this diner longer than I'd been alive. Outside, the rain had stopped. Weak sunlight filtered through breaking clouds, turning the wet pavement into a mirror that reflected sky. I should get going, Mom said eventually, though she made no move to stand. Still so much to sort through at the house. Your father kept everything, every card, every ticket stub, every program from every school play either of you were ever in. I can help, I offered. This week, I can clear my schedule. No, she said firmly. You've done enough. You've been doing enough for months. I need to do this part myself. Need the time with his things, his memories." She paused. "But maybe this weekend, you could both come over. Help me start going through the garage. God knows what's buried in there." "Of course," Sarah and I said together. We walked out into the weak sunshine, stood in the parking lot, making the awkward goodbye motions of people who don't want to separate but don't have a reason to stay. "Thank you," Mom said to Sarah, pulling her into an unexpected hug. "For making my son happy. For being here today. For being you." "Thank you for raising someone worth knowing," Sarah replied. Mom held me longest, her face pressed into my shoulder, the way she used to when I was little and scared of thunderstorms. "Your father loved you so much," she whispered. "Both of you. Even Marcus. Even after everything. He loved you both so much." "I know, Mom. But he was proud of you, Daniel. Of who you became. Of who you chose to be. Never forget that." "I won't." She pulled back, wiped her eyes, got into her car with the decisive movements of someone forcing themselves to keep going. Sarah and I stood in the parking lot and watched her drive away. "You okay?" Sarah asked for the third time that day. I thought about the funeral, about Emma's face when she realized she'd miscalculated, about Marcus checking his watch like our father's death was an inconvenience, about my mother's fierce defense, about the booth where my father used to do crosswords, about the pie we'd just shared, about the woman standing next to me who'd driven here at dawn because she knew I'd need her, who'd held my hand through the service, who'd met my mother with grace and my ex-fiancé with dignified silence. "Yeah," I said, and this time I was absolutely certain. "Yeah, I really am." "Good," Sarah said, "because we should probably talk about what happens next." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She gave me a look, the one that meant I was being deliberately obtuse. "Daniel, you just introduced me to your brother and your ex-fiancé at your father's funeral. This is going to have consequences." And standing there in the parking lot of Rosie's Diner, with weak sunlight breaking through clouds and the smell of rain-washed pavement in the air, I realized she was right. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. The messages started before we even made it home. My phone buzzed once while Sarah was driving, then again, then 3 times in rapid succession. I pulled it out of my pocket and stared at the screen, watching notifications pile up like snow in a blizzard. "Marcus, we need to talk. Marcus, call me when you get a chance. Marcus, seriously, Dan, call me." Unknown number. "This is Emma. I got your number from Marcus. Can we talk, please?" Unknown number. "I know you're angry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding." Unknown number. "Daniel, please, just 5 minutes." I turned the phone face down on my lap. "Let me guess," Sarah said, eyes on the road. "They want to talk." "How did you know?" "Because people like that always want to talk once they realize they've miscalculated." She signaled to change lanes, her movements precise and calm. They want a chance to reframe the narrative, make themselves feel better about how they acted. "You sound like you've dealt with this before." She smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "You don't build a biotech company as a 32-year-old woman without encountering your share of people who underestimate you, then act surprised when you succeed, then want to suddenly be your best friend." The phone buzzed again and again. "You don't have to respond," Sarah said gently. "Not today, not while you're grieving." She was right. I knew she was right. But there was a part of me, the part that had been raised to be polite, to not cause conflict, to always give people the benefit of the doubt, that felt guilty for ignoring them. "What if they actually want to apologize?" I asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, navigating through traffic. When she finally spoke, her voice was kind but firm. "Then they'll still want to apologize tomorrow, or next week, or next month. Real apologies don't have expiration dates, Daniel. And people who are genuinely sorry understand that sometimes the injured party needs space before they're ready to hear it. We pulled into the driveway of the house Sarah and I had bought 6 months ago, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with a yard big enough for the garden Sarah wanted to plant, and a garage I'd converted into a home office. Nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress. Just a house that felt like home. The phone was buzzing continuously now. I turned it off completely. "Good," Sarah said, watching me. "Now, come inside. I'm making you tea and we're watching something mindless, and you're not thinking about any of this until tomorrow." "I don't deserve you," I said. "You're right," she agreed, but she was smiling. "You deserve better. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me." Inside, the house was exactly as we'd left it that morning. Coffee mugs in the sink, Sarah's medical journals scattered across the dining table, the blanket we'd huddled under while I cried about my father still draped over the couch. Evidence of a life being lived. A good life. A real life. Sarah disappeared into the kitchen, and I heard the kettle click on, the cabinet opening where we kept the tea. I sank into the couch, suddenly exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. The kind of tired that settles into your bones. My father was dead. My brother had shown up late to the funeral with my ex-fiancée. My ex-fiancée had tried to gloat about winning some imaginary competition, and I'd introduced them to my wife, who they hadn't known existed. When I laid it out like that, it sounded like a bad soap opera. Sarah returned with 2 mugs, chamomile for me, green tea for her, and settled onto the couch, pulling my feet into her lap. "Talk to me," she said. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I should feel more triumphant," I admitted. "I'm thinking that was supposed to be this big moment of vindication, right? Proving to Emma that I didn't need her, that I was fine, that I'd moved on to someone better. But instead I just feel..." "Tired?" Sarah supplied. "Yeah, tired, and sad, and kind of empty." "That's because revenge doesn't actually make you feel better," Sarah said quietly. "Even justified revenge, even when the other person deserves it. It might feel good for a moment, but it doesn't fill the hole they left." "Did I do it for revenge?" I asked. "Introducing you like that?" She considered the question seriously, the way she approached everything. "I don't think so. I think you did it to protect yourself, to show them, and maybe show yourself, that you survived what they did, that you built something real after they left. That's different from revenge." "It felt a little like revenge," I admitted. "Good," she said firmly. "They earned a little revenge. Your ex-fiancé showed up to your father's funeral and tried to gloat about winning. That's sociopathic behavior, Daniel. Being satisfied that you got to deflate her ego isn't revenge. It's justice." I sipped my tea. Outside, the sun was setting, turning the sky into watercolor shades of orange and pink. Beautiful, despite everything. "Tell me about her," Sarah said suddenly. "About Emma. The real Emma, not the woman at the funeral. Who was she when you loved her?" I was surprised by the question. We'd talked about Emma before, obviously. You can't be in a serious relationship without discussing your exes, but Sarah had never asked for details, never pushed. "Why do you want to know?" I asked. "Because I want to understand what you lost, or what you thought you lost." She squeezed my foot gently. "I want to understand the whole story." So I told her. I told her about meeting Emma in college, in a literature class we'd both taken to fill a gen ed requirement. How she'd sat 2 rows ahead of me and always had intelligent questions that made the professor smile. How I'd finally worked up the courage to ask her to study together, and she'd said yes, and we'd ended up talking for 4 hours without opening a single book. I told her about our first date, a hole-in-the-wall Thai restaurant where the food was incredible and the ambiance was non-existent. How Emma had laughed when I'd tried to use chopsticks and failed spectacularly. How she'd taught me, patient and amused. how I'd walked her home through snow that fell like a benediction. I told her about the small things, how Emma loved old movies, the black and white ones with snappy dialogue, how she'd wanted to be a journalist, had dreams of writing for the New York Times, how she'd volunteer at the animal shelter every weekend and come home covered in cat hair and smelling like wet dog and radiantly happy. I told her about the proposal, nothing fancy, just the two of us on a hiking trail we'd been going to since we started dating, at the overlook where you could see the whole valley spread out below. How I'd been so nervous I'd almost dropped the ring. How she'd cried and said yes and kissed me like I was the only person in the world. "She sounds wonderful," Sarah said quietly when I finished. She was, I agreed. Or I thought she was. I don't know anymore if that person was real, or if I just wanted her to be real. "What changed?" "Marcus," I said simply. Or rather, Marcus's success changed things. I explained how my brother had always been ambitious, always been the golden child, the one with the plan. How he'd gone into finance straight out of college, worked insane hours, climbed the ladder with single-minded determination. How he'd made his first million by 28 and never looked back. "Emma and I were still struggling," I continued. "I was building my consulting business, working 80-hour weeks for clients who paid late or tried to negotiate down my already low rates. Emma had gotten a job at a local paper, but it wasn't the Times. It wasn't even the regional daily. It was a weekly community paper that barely paid enough to cover her student loans." "That must have been hard," Sarah said. "It was, but I thought we were doing okay. I thought we were building something together." Then Marcus started dating seriously, taking women to galas and charity events, showing up to family dinners in $1,000 suits. And I started noticing the way Emma looked at him, at his watch, his car, his stories about business trips to London and Tokyo and Dubai. The tea had gone lukewarm in my hands. I set it down. She started making comments, I said. Little things at first. "Wouldn't it be nice to not worry about money? Don't you ever think about doing something more lucrative? Marcus seems really happy with his choices." I told myself it was just stress, that we were both working too hard and not seeing enough reward, that it would get better. "But it didn't," Sarah said. "No, it didn't." And then one day, I stopped, the memory still sharp even after 7 years. One day I came home early. We were supposed to go to dinner, celebrate our engagement anniversary, and she was packing. Sarah's hand tightened on my foot. Just packing. Very calm, very methodical. Had 3 suitcases on the bed, was folding clothes like she was going on a business trip. And I said, "Where are you going?" And she said, I had to pause, had to breathe through it. She said, "I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am, but I can't do this anymore. I can't be poor forever. I can't keep pretending that love is enough when we can barely afford rent." "Jesus," Sarah whispered. I asked her if there was someone else. She said no, said she just needed time to think, needed to figure out what she really wanted. I believed her. I laughed bitterly. God, I actually believed her. Spent 2 weeks calling, texting, begging her to come back, to talk to me, to give us another chance. And then Marcus posted a photo on social media. Him and Emma at some restaurant that required reservations 6 months in advance. Caption said, "New beginnings." I called him. He actually answered. Said, and I'll never forget this, he said, "Come on, Dan. You had to know you couldn't keep her. She deserves better than a struggling IT guy." The room was dark now. Neither of us had turned on the lights. We just sat there in the dusk, my past spread out between us like a map of old wounds. They got married 3 months later. I finished. Big wedding. Destination ceremony in Tuscany. I saw the photos. Everyone saw the photos. She wore a dress that probably cost more than I made that entire year. And my voice cracked. I fell apart. Completely. spectacularly, fell apart. Sarah moved then, shifting my feet gently aside and pulling me into her arms. I let her hold me, let myself be held, this thing I'd learned how to do after years of thinking I had to be strong all the time. "But you put yourself back together," she said into my hair. "You did the work. You built your business. You became someone your father was proud of. You became someone I could fall in love with." "She didn't even recognize that person today," I said. "Didn't recognize me. She saw me and still saw the struggling, desperate guy she left 7 years ago. Didn't occur to her that I might have changed, might have grown, might have become someone different." "Good," Sarah said fiercely. "Good, because the person you became is someone she doesn't deserve to know." We sat like that for a long time, in the growing dark, in the quiet house that we'd chosen together. Eventually, Sarah stood and turned on a single lamp, warm light pushing back the shadows. "I'm going to make dinner," she announced, something completely unhealthy and comforting. "And we're going to eat too much, and watch a movie with explosions and absolutely no emotional depth. And tomorrow," she cupped my face in her hands, "tomorrow we'll figure out what to do about the messages, about Marcus and Emma, about all of it. But tonight, we're just going to be." "Okay," I said. "Okay," she echoed. She was in the kitchen, humming something off-key, when my tablet chimed from the coffee table. I'd forgotten I'd left it on this morning, checking the funeral home's directions. The screen lit up with a notification. Email from Marcus. Subject line: "We need to talk about Sarah." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I picked up the tablet and brought it to Sarah in the kitchen. "They're not going to let this go," I said. She glanced at the subject line and her expression hardened. "No," she agreed. "They're not, because they want to know how you did it, how you ended up with me. They want to know the story, want to find the angle, want to figure out if there's something they can use." "Use for what?" "I don't know yet. But people like Marcus and Emma, they don't just accept defeat. They regroup. They strategize." She turned back to the stove, where something was sizzling that smelled like garlic and butter and comfort. "Which means we need to strategize too." "I don't want to play games," I said tiredly. "I know you don't, and normally I'd say you shouldn't have to." She plated the food. Pasta carbonara, I realized, my favorite. "But they've already shown they're willing to ambush you at your father's funeral. They've already shown they have no boundaries, no basic human decency, which means we can't just ignore this and hope it goes away." She was right. I knew she was right. We ate in silence, thinking. "What's in the email?" Sarah asked finally. I opened it, read it aloud. "Dan, I know today was difficult for everyone, but we need to talk about your relationship with Dr. Chen. There are some things you should know about her company, about the acquisition, about certain details that might not be public knowledge. I have concerns, and I think we should discuss them before things go any further. Call me tomorrow." Marcus Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Then she laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. "Oh, he's good," she said. "He's very good." "What do you mean?" "He's planting doubt, suggesting there's something wrong with me, with my company, with our relationship, implying he has information you don't, making himself the concerned brother who's just trying to protect you." She set down her fork. "It's a classic manipulation tactic, and it's complete bullshit." "You're sure?" "Daniel." She looked at me directly. "My company was acquired by a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical corporation. The due diligence process took 8 months and involved lawyers, accountants, and investigators who examined every single aspect of our business. If there were skeletons, they'd have found them. Marcus doesn't know anything they didn't already know." "Then why?" "Because he's trying to regain control of the narrative. He's trying to make you doubt yourself, doubt me, doubt what you have. And if he can get you to call him, He gets to be the one who sets the terms of the conversation. I pushed my pasta around my plate. So what do we do? Sarah smiled then. Not the kind smile, not the understanding smile. The smile that had probably terrified competing biotech firms. We do what my mentor taught me to do when facing hostile acquisition attempts, she said. We get ahead of the story. We control the narrative. We make sure that whatever Marcus and Emma are planning, we're already 3 steps ahead. How? First, we finish dinner. Then we make a list of every possible angle they might take, every piece of information they might try to use, every relationship they might try to poison. She stood, started clearing plates, and then we make a plan. A real plan. Because if they want to play games, her eyes met mine, fierce and protective. We're going to make sure we win. And sitting there in our kitchen, in the house we'd built together, eating carbonara and planning strategy like we were preparing for corporate warfare, I realized something. I'd spent 7 years thinking Emma had destroyed me when she left. But maybe she'd actually set me free to become someone stronger, someone smarter, someone who deserved a partner who fought for him instead of one who fought for his brother's bank account. Okay, I said. Let's make a plan. Sarah grinned. Now you're talking. Outside, night had fallen completely, but inside, in the warm light of our kitchen, we were just getting started. We worked through the night like generals planning a campaign. Sarah had cleared the dining room table, spreading out her laptop, a legal pad, and 2 mugs of coffee strong enough to strip paint. I sat across from her, my own laptop open, watching her transform from my gentle, compassionate wife into something sharper, something formidable. This was the Sarah who'd pitched to venture capitalists at 26, the Sarah who'd negotiated a 9-figure acquisition while competitors tried to undercut her, the Sarah who'd built a biotech company from nothing in an industry that ate startups for breakfast. Okay, she said, pen poised over the legal pad. Let's game this out. What does Marcus actually want? I thought about it. To feel superior? To prove he made the right choice helping Emma leave me? Maybe. But that's emotional. I'm asking what he wants practically, strategically. She tapped the pen against her lips. Marcus is a finance guy, right? What kind of finance? Private equity. He runs a fund that invests in mid-market companies, helps them grow, then sells them for a profit. Sarah's eyes narrowed. So he's always looking for opportunities, always networking, always calculating angles. She wrote something on the pad. What if this isn't about you at all? What if this is about me? What do you mean? Think about it, Daniel. Your brother shows up to the funeral, probably expecting to find you still struggling, still bitter, still the same person Emma left. Instead, he discovers you're married to someone whose company just sold for... She paused. Actually, do you know the acquisition price? I saw it in the news. Wasn't it around 200 million? 240 million, she corrected. But that's just the upfront payment. With earnouts and performance incentives, it could go up to 400 million over the next 3 years. I felt my eyes widen. We'd never really talked about the money. Sarah lived so modestly, drove a Subaru, wore jeans and sweaters most days, got excited about farmers market, vegetables, that I sometimes forgot she was, by any objective measure, extremely wealthy. So Marcus sees you, Sarah continued, married to someone with serious money and serious connections in the biotech space. An industry his fund might want to invest in. An industry where having the right relationships could mean the difference between a good deal and a great deal. You think he wants to use you for business connections? I think Marcus wants to use everyone for everything, Sarah said bluntly. That's how people like him operate. Every relationship is transactional. Every connection is an asset. And right now, I'm an asset he doesn't have access to because, she smiled thinly, because I'm married to the brother he betrayed. I sat back processing this. So, the email is him trying to create an opening, plant doubt, position himself as the concerned brother, get you to call him so he can start working his way in. Once he's in, he'll be charming. He'll apologize for the past, say he and Emma made mistakes, suggest we all move forward as family. And somewhere in there, he'll mention he's looking at biotech investments, and wouldn't it be great if Sarah could introduce him to some key people? It made sense. It made horrible, perfect sense. But what about Emma? I asked. What does she want? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. I think Emma wants what she's always wanted, to be on the winning team. She thought Marcus was the winning team, but now she's seeing that maybe she miscalculated, that the struggling IT guy she left has ended up with someone more successful than Marcus. And that has to be eating at her. So she wants what? Back in my life? God, no. You're not rich enough. Sarah said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. But she wants to be friends, wants to be in orbit, wants access to what you have, which is me, my connections, my world. She's a social climber, Daniel. Always has been. And social climbers don't like being on the outside looking in. I stood, suddenly restless, and walked to the window. Outside, our quiet street was dark except for the occasional porch light. Normal people sleeping in normal houses, not dealing with manipulative siblings and scheming ex-fiancés. This is exhausting, I said. Why can't people just be people? Why does everything have to be strategy and angles and calculations? Because some people are built that way, Sarah said gently. And I'm sorry, but your brother is one of them. And Emma chose to be with someone like that, which tells you everything you need to know about who she became. Who she became, I repeated. You think she wasn't always like that? I think people reveal themselves under pressure. Money is pressure. The possibility of money is pressure. Emma was probably always capable of what she did. She just needed the right circumstances to bring it out. Sarah stood, came to stand beside me at the window. The question is, what do we do about it? We could just ignore them, I suggested. Block their numbers, refuse to engage. We could, and for a normal person that would work. But Marcus isn't going to let this go that easily. He'll find other ways to reach out, show up at your office, contact your mutual friends, maybe even show up here. She paused. And there's your mother to consider. I turned to look at her. Mom, she's grieving. She's vulnerable. And Marcus is still her son. If he's smart, and I think he is, he'll use that. He'll start visiting her, being the attentive son, slowly working his way back into her good graces. And he'll use that access to get information about us, about you, about me. The thought of Marcus manipulating our mother, especially now, made my blood run hot. So what do we do? I asked again. Sarah walked back to the table, looked at her notes. We respond, she said finally, but on our terms. We control the narrative. We set the boundaries. We make it clear that if they want any kind of relationship with us, it's going to be completely on our terms, with full transparency and with absolutely no bullshit. How? She smiled, the strategic smile again. We invite them to dinner. I stared at her. You're joking. I'm completely serious. Think about it. They're expecting avoidance or anger. They're expecting you to either ignore them or lash out. They're not expecting a calm, controlled invitation to a neutral setting where we get to set the tone and the rules. A dinner, I said slowly. With Marcus and Emma. With clear ground rules established beforehand, clear boundaries, and a clear agenda that we control. She was warming to the idea now, pacing. We meet at a restaurant, public, so they can't make a scene. We tell them up front that we're willing to have a conversation about moving forward, but only if they're willing to be completely honest about their intentions. And you think they'll agree to that? I think Marcus will agree to anything if he thinks it gets him access to my network. And Emma will follow Marcus's lead, like she always does. Sarah stopped pacing, looked at me directly. But here's the key. We record everything. What? Not illegally. We tell them up front that we're recording the conversation, for clarity, for transparency, so there's no misunderstanding about what's said. Most states allow recording with consent, and by agreeing to the dinner with that condition, they're consenting. Why would they agree to that? Because Marcus is arrogant. He'll think he can control a conversation even if it's being recorded. He'll think he's smart enough to say the right things, get what he wants, and come out on top. Sarah's smile was sharp now. But we'll have a record of everything they say, every promise, every justification, every manipulative tactic, and if they ever try to twist the narrative later, we have receipts. I was starting to understand why Sarah had been so successful in business. You've done this before, I said. Haven't you? Twice. Once with a competitor who tried to steal our research. Once with an investor who tried to force us into a bad deal. She shrugged. Both times, having a clear record of what was actually said versus what they later claimed was said saved us millions of dollars and a lot of legal headaches. I thought about it. Thought about sitting across from Marcus and Emma in a restaurant, having a recorded conversation about their intentions and our boundaries. It felt both crazy and perfectly reasonable. What if they refuse? I asked. What if they say no to the recording or the conditions? Then we have our answer. We know they're not interested in genuine reconciliation or honest conversation, and we can cut them off with a clear conscience, knowing we gave them a fair chance that they chose not to take. And if they agree, then we control the narrative. We set the terms, and whatever happens next, we're prepared for it. Sarah came closer, took my hands in hers. Look, I know this feels manipulative. I know it feels like we're stooping to their level, but here's the difference. We're not trying to use them. We're not trying to get something from them. We're just protecting ourselves from people who have already proven they're willing to hurt you. She was right. I knew she was right. But there was still a part of me that resisted the idea of turning human relationships into strategy sessions. What about just being honest? I asked. What about just telling them we don't want a relationship, that too much has happened, too much damage has been done? Because they won't accept that, Sarah said gently. People like Marcus and Emma, they don't accept rejection. They don't accept boundaries unless those boundaries are enforced. So we need to enforce them in a way they can't ignore or manipulate or talk their way around. I pulled my hands free, ran them through my hair. It was past midnight. I was exhausted. My father had been buried less than 12 hours ago, and here I was planning a strategic dinner with my ex-fiancé and the brother who'd betrayed me. Can we sleep on it? I asked. Just for tonight? Can we table this and come back to it tomorrow when I'm not running on grief and adrenaline? Sarah's face softened immediately. Of course. God, yes, of course. I'm sorry. I get into strategy mode and forget that you're still processing everything that happened today. She closed her laptop with a decisive click. Bed. Now. The manipulative relatives can wait. We went through our nighttime routine in comfortable silence, brushing teeth, setting alarms, checking that the doors were locked. Normal things. Grounding things. Evidence that life was still mostly ordinary, despite everything. In bed, Sarah curled against me, her head on my chest. Thank you, I said into the darkness. For what? For being on my side, for thinking 3 steps ahead, I struggled to find words, for being the kind of person who knows how to fight these battles. I don't think I could do this alone. You could, she said with certainty. But you don't have to. That's what marriage is. You don't have to fight alone anymore. We lay there in the quiet, and I thought about Emma. About how, when we'd been together, I'd always felt like I was the one protecting her, supporting her, fighting for us, and how exhausting that had been, How one-sided. With Sarah, it was different. We protected each other, supported each other, fought for each other. That was the difference between a partnership and a performance. "I love you," I said. "I love you too," she replied. "Even when you're stubborn about answering emails." I smiled in the darkness. Especially then. Especially then. I was drifting off to sleep when she spoke again. "Daniel? Your dad would be proud of you, for how you handled today, for not lashing out at Marcus, for protecting yourself without being cruel, for," her voice caught slightly, "for becoming someone who knows his own worth." My throat felt tight. "You think so?" "I know so. I only met him a few times, but I saw the way he looked at you. He knew exactly who his son was, and he was so proud." I held her tighter, grateful for the darkness that hid the tears that had started falling again. Grief was like that. It ambushed you when you least expected it. One moment, you were fine, planning strategy, being strong. The next moment, you were remembering that your father was gone and would never know how this all turned out. "He would have liked this plan," I said eventually. "The dinner idea. He always said the best way to deal with a problem was to face it head-on with clear boundaries and honest conversation." "Smart man," Sarah murmured, already half asleep. "Yeah," I agreed. "He really was." We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, while outside the night wore on, and somewhere across town, Marcus and Emma were probably awake too, planning their own strategies, forming their own narratives. But for the first time since the funeral, I wasn't afraid of what they might do, because I wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Sarah on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was brisk, professional, the tone she used for business calls. I shuffled out in my pajamas to find her at the table, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, that's fine. Thursday works. Send me the details, and I'll have my lawyer review." She paused, listening. "No, I understand the timeline. We'll make it work. Thanks, Robert." She hung up and looked at me apologetically. "Sorry, acquisition stuff. There's always one more meeting, one more detail to hammer out." "It's fine," I said, pouring myself coffee. "How long does this process usually take?" "The initial sale is done, but the integration, getting my team absorbed into their company, making sure the research continues properly, hitting the benchmarks for the earn-out payments, that's going to take a couple years." She made a face. "It's the part of selling a company they don't tell you about in the success stories. The endless meetings and contract reviews and making sure the thing you built doesn't get destroyed in the process." I sat down across from her, nursing my coffee. "Have you thought more about the dinner idea?" she asked. I had. I'd dreamed about it, actually. Strange, anxious dreams where Marcus and Emma sat across from us at an endless table while a recording device the size of a refrigerator documented everything. "I think we should do it," I said, "but I want to add one condition." "What's that?" "We bring my mother in on the plan, tell her what we're doing and why, make sure she's protected from whatever manipulation might come her way." Sarah nodded approvingly. "That's smart. She deserves to know what's happening, and it prevents Marcus from using her as a back channel." "So we're really doing this," I said. "We're really inviting them to dinner." "We're really doing this," Sarah confirmed. "But first, you need to respond to Marcus's email. Set the tone. Establish that you're in control." She slid her laptop across to me. On the screen was a draft email she'd written. "Marcus, I received your message. Sarah and I are aware that there are things we need to discuss regarding recent events and future family relationships. We're willing to have a conversation, but it needs to happen on clear terms. 1. A dinner meeting at a neutral location, restaurant TBD. 2. Both Sarah and I, and both you and Emma present. 3. The conversation will be recorded, with all parties' knowledge and consent, for clarity and future reference. 4. The purpose is to establish clear boundaries and expectations going forward, not to relitigate the past. If these terms are acceptable, we can schedule something for next week. If not, we'll respectfully decline further contact and ask that you respect that boundary. Let me know by Friday. Daniel. I read it twice. It was perfect. Firm, but not hostile. Clear, but not cruel. It gave them an option while making it clear we controlled the terms. It's good, I said. Really good. So send it, Sarah encouraged. I looked at the send button, thought about what clicking it would set in motion, thought about whether I really wanted to open this door. Then I thought about my father, about the way he'd always faced problems directly, with dignity and clear boundaries. I clicked send. There, I said. It's done. Sarah smiled and squeezed my hand across the table. Now we wait and see if they take the bait. And if they do, then we have dinner, she said simply, and we find out exactly what Marcus and Emma really want. Outside, the morning sun was burning off the last of the fog. A new day, a new chapter, and for better or worse, we were ready for it. Marcus's reply came faster than I expected. I was in the middle of a client call, walking Mrs. Patterson through her new point-of-sale system for the third time because she kept forgetting her password, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. I glanced at it reflexively and saw Marcus's name. Mr. Hayes? Mrs. Patterson's voice crackled through my headset. Are you still there? Yes, sorry, Mrs. Patterson. You were saying the screen goes blank when you try to process a return. It doesn't go blank, it goes blue. There's a difference. There wasn't a difference, but I'd learned years ago that arguing with clients about technical descriptions was a losing battle. Right, of course, the blue screen. Let me remote in and take a look. I helped her through the issue, a simple setting that had been toggled off somehow, and promised to send her a video tutorial she could reference. Then I hung up and opened Marcus's email with the same trepidation I'd feel opening a letter from the IRS. Dan, your terms are acceptable. Emma and I are available Tuesday evening. I'll make a reservation at Meridian for 7 p.m., private dining room so we can talk freely. I'll send you the details. I appreciate you being willing to have this conversation. There's a lot that needs to be said, and I think we can all benefit from clearing the air. See you Tuesday. Marcus. I read it 3 times, looking for the trap, because there had to be a trap. Marcus didn't just accept terms. He negotiated. He countered. He found angles. Meridian. Of course he'd chosen Meridian, the most expensive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where you needed reservations 6 months in advance and a single appetizer cost more than most people's grocery budget, the kind of place that was designed to intimidate, and a private dining room. Somewhere we can talk freely, which really meant somewhere without witnesses beyond the 4 of us. I forwarded the email to Sarah with a single question. Thoughts? Her reply came within minutes. He's trying to control the environment. Choosing an expensive restaurant puts us in his world. Private room means no public accountability, but we agreed to the recording, so he can't completely control the narrative. Also, Meridian has excellent sea bass. Silver lining. Despite everything, I smiled. Trust Sarah to find the culinary upside to a potentially disastrous dinner. I called my mother before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. Daniel, is everything okay? Everything's fine, Mom. Well, not fine exactly. Can I come over? There's something Sarah and I need to talk to you about. A pause. This is about Marcus, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Come now, she said. I'll make coffee. My mother's house, my childhood home, looked smaller every time I visited. Not physically smaller, just diminished somehow, like grief had compressed it. The windows where my father used to stand doing his crossword puzzles seemed darker. The driveway where he'd taught me to change a tire seemed narrower. The porch where we'd sat on summer evenings seemed to sag more than I remembered. Mom met me at the door, pulling me into a tight hug before I'd even fully crossed the threshold. "You look tired," she said. It was both observation and accusation. "I am tired," I admitted. Sarah had stayed home to handle more acquisition calls, so it was just the two of us in the kitchen that still smelled faintly of my father's preferred brand of coffee. Mom poured us both cups from a pot that was too full for one person, and I wondered how many mornings she'd made a full pot out of habit before remembering she was alone now. "So," she said, settling into her usual chair at the kitchen table, "tell me about Marcus." I told her everything, about the email he'd sent, about Sarah's theory that he wanted access to her network, about our decision to meet with him and Emma for a recorded dinner conversation, about our concerns that he might try to manipulate her. She listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Your father and I used to argue about Marcus," she said finally, "about whether we'd failed him somehow, whether we'd put too much pressure on him to succeed or not enough, whether the person he became was our fault or his choice." "Mom, let me finish." Her voice was gentle but firm. "We never came to a conclusion. But your father, in those last days, he said something I've been thinking about a lot. He said, Marcus chose money. Daniel chose integrity. We raised them the same, gave them the same values, the same opportunities. They just chose different paths." She looked at me directly. "Your father was proud of your choices, Daniel. He was heartbroken about Marcus's, but he never blamed himself. And I need you to know, I don't blame you for what you're about to do, for protecting yourself and Sarah, for setting boundaries with your brother." I felt my throat tighten. "I don't want to cut him out of your life, Mom. He's still your son." "He is, and I love him. But love doesn't mean accepting bad behavior. Love doesn't mean letting him use this family as a networking opportunity." She set down her coffee cup with a decisive click. "I want to be there." "What?" "At the dinner. I want to be there." Her eyes were fierce now, the same fierceness I remembered from when she'd confronted my high school principal after a teacher had treated me unfairly. If Marcus wants to have a family conversation, then let's have a real family conversation with the whole family present. "Mom, I'm not asking Daniel, I'm telling you, if you and Sarah are going to face Marcus and Emma, you're not doing it alone. I'll sit there quietly if that's what you want. But I'm going to be there. Because I'm still the mother of both of you, and mothers don't let their children walk into ambushes by themselves." I looked at her, this woman who'd spent 40 years teaching teenagers, who'd raised 2 sons, mostly on her own, while my father worked long hours for teacher's pay, who'd buried her husband 3 days ago and was still finding the strength to protect her children. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I'll tell Marcus you're coming." She nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now tell me about this restaurant. Meridian? That's the one Marcus took Emma to when they first started dating, isn't it?" "I think so." "Why?" "Because he's trying to remind you of that. Trying to take you back to when he won. When he got the girl and the money and everything he wanted." She smiled grimly. "He's not as subtle as he thinks he is." Sarah said the same thing, about him trying to control the environment. "Sarah is a smart woman," Mom said. "Your father liked her very much, you know, the few times they met. He said she reminded him of me, tough when she needed to be, but kind by default." "That's Sarah," I agreed. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "I know this is hard. I know you probably wanted to just ignore them, move on with your life. But I think you're doing the right thing, facing them, setting boundaries, making it clear that you're not the person Emma left, and you're not the brother Marcus can manipulate." "What if it goes wrong?" I asked. "What if they're not there for reconciliation at all? What if they just want to I don't know, gloat, or worse. Then we'll know, Mom said simply, and we'll handle it, together. I called Sarah from the car on the way home. My mother wants to come to the dinner, I said without preamble. Oh, a pause while Sarah processed this. How do you feel about that? Honestly, relieved. She's better at reading Marcus than I am, and she deserves to be there. This affects her too. Then she should come, Sarah said decisively. I'll update Marcus. 5 people instead of 4. He won't like it. It disrupts his control of the situation, but he can't really object to your mother being present at a family dinner. He'll probably try anyway. Let him try. We've already established that we set the terms. I could hear her typing in the background. I'm drafting the email now. Anything else we should include? I thought about it. Ask him to confirm that he understands the conversation will be recorded. Make it explicit. I don't want him claiming later that he didn't know or didn't consent. Good idea. Anything else? Yeah. Ask what Emma's role is in all this. Is she there as his wife, as my ex, or as something else? I want to know what we're dealing with. More typing. Done. I'm sending it now. And sent. We should have a response by tonight. How are you so good at this? I asked. Practice, she said. You don't negotiate with pharma executives and venture capitalists for 7 years without learning how to set clear terms and stick to them. This is just the same skill set, different context. It feels different, though. This is personal. Which makes it harder for you, Sarah acknowledged. But easier for me because I don't have any emotional attachment to Marcus or Emma. I can see them clearly for what they are, which is people trying to get something from us while pretending they care about family. You really think that's all this is? A business opportunity for Marcus? I think Marcus sees everything as a business opportunity, but I also think, she paused, considering her words, I think there's probably some genuine curiosity too, about how you ended up with me, about how the struggling it guy his wife left ended up married to someone more successful than he is. That has to bother him on some level. Good, I said, and was surprised by how much I meant it. I hope it keeps him up at night. Sarah laughed. There's the fighting spirit. Hold on to that feeling. We're going to need it Tuesday. Marcus's response to Sarah's email came at 10 p.m., probably after some heated discussion with Emma about the changing parameters. Sarah, I understand Martha wants to attend. While I think some conversations might be better had between the 4 of us initially, I respect that this is a family matter, and she has every right to be present. Regarding the recording, yes, I understand and consent to the conversation being recorded. I assume the same courtesy will be extended to Emma and myself if we wish to have our own recording. As for Emma's role, she's my wife, obviously, but she's also someone who cares about this family and wants to see if there's a path forward that doesn't involve continued estrangement. We're both approaching this conversation in good faith. The reservation is confirmed for Tuesday, 7 p.m. I'll send the address. Marcus Sarah called me immediately after reading it. He's hedging, she said. Notice the language? Good faith. Path forward. Continued estrangement. He's already framing this as us being the ones who are difficult, who are prolonging some conflict that he wants to resolve. Should we push back on that? No. Let him have his narrative for now. We'll address it Tuesday. I could hear her moving around, probably pacing the way she did when she was thinking. The recording question is interesting, though. He wants his own recording, which means he's probably planning to selectively edit it later, use it to show people how reasonable he was being. Can he do that? He can try. But if we have the full unedited recording, we can always release it if he tries to manipulate what was said. Mutually assured documentation. She paused. I'm going to respond and say yes, they can record too, but all parties need to provide full, unedited copies to each other within 24 hours of the dinner. That way nobody can selectively edit without the others knowing. You've really thought this through. Daniel, I once had a competitor secretly record a meeting, edit it to make it sound like I'd admitted to research fraud, and try to use it to tank our funding round. I learned the hard way to think 3 steps ahead on documentation. Her voice softened. I know this feels paranoid, but trust me, with people like Marcus, paranoia is just preparation. Okay, do what you think is best. Always do, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Saturday morning, I took my mother shopping for an outfit for the dinner. I don't need a new outfit, she protested as I drove her to the department store. I have plenty of perfectly good clothes. Mom, you're going to Meridian. It's the kind of place where they judge you for your silverware choices. You need something that makes a statement. What kind of statement? That you're not intimidated, that you belong there as much as anyone else, that you're not the grieving widow they can patronize or manipulate. She was quiet for a moment. Your father would have hated this, all this posturing and strategy. He believed in just being honest and letting the chips fall where they may. Dad also believed in being prepared, I countered. Remember how he used to prep for parent-teacher conferences? He'd make a list of every concern, every question, every point he wanted to address. He didn't go in winging it. That's true, she admitted. He'd spend hours on those lists. Drive me crazy sometimes how thorough he was. We spent 2 hours in the store while Mom tried on outfits, and I gave feedback like I knew anything about women's fashion. Finally, we settled on a navy dress with a structured jacket. Elegant, authoritative, the kind of outfit that said respected professional rather than grieving widow. You look powerful, I told her as she examined herself in the 3-way mirror. I look expensive, she corrected. This dress costs more than I usually spend on clothes in a year. My treat. Consider it an investment in making Marcus uncomfortable. She smiled at that, a real smile. Well, when you put it that way. We bought the dress, along with shoes and a simple necklace that Sarah had recommended via text message. As we loaded the purchases into my car, Mom turned to me. Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Are you doing this for the right reasons? Are you meeting with Marcus because you genuinely want to see if there's a path to reconciliation? Or are you doing this because you want to show him how much better you're doing without him? I thought about lying, about giving her the answer she probably wanted to hear, but she'd asked for honesty. Both, I said. I want to believe that people can change, that Marcus might have some genuine regret about what happened. But I stopped, trying to find the right words. I also spent 7 years feeling like I'd lost. Like Emma, choosing Marcus was proof that I wasn't good enough, successful enough. And yeah, part of me wants him to see that I didn't just survive, I thrived. That his version of success isn't the only version that matters. Mom nodded slowly. That's honest, and I appreciate it. She put her hand on my arm. Don't let the need to prove something blind you to what's actually happening. Don't let Marcus or Emma manipulate you just because you're trying to show them you can't be manipulated. That's a very twisty piece of advice, I said. Welcome to dealing with Marcus, she replied. Everything with him is twisty. Tuesday came faster than I wanted it to. Sarah and I spent Monday evening preparing, reviewing our strategy, discussing potential topics that might come up, practicing staying calm and centered even if things got heated. Remember, Sarah said as we ran through scenarios for the 3rd time, we're not trying to win an argument. We're not trying to prove anything. We're just establishing boundaries and seeing if they can respect those boundaries. That's it. And if they can't, then we leave. We walk away with our heads high, knowing we gave them a fair chance that they chose not to take. She squeezed my hand. But I don't think it'll come to that. I think Marcus will behave, at least during dinner. He wants something from us, and you don't get what you want by being openly hostile. What about Emma? Emma will follow Marcus's lead, she always has. I hope she was right. Tuesday afternoon, I picked up my mother and we drove to meet Sarah at the restaurant. Mom was quiet in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, the new dress perfect and intimidating under her winter coat. "You okay?" I asked. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm here anyway. Sometimes that's the best you can do." We pulled into Meridian's parking lot, valet only, of course, and I saw Sarah waiting by the entrance. She'd chosen a simple black dress that somehow managed to look both understated and incredibly expensive. Her hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. She looked like exactly what she was, someone who belonged in rooms where decisions worth millions of dollars were made. "Ready?" she asked as we approached. Mom straightened her shoulders. I took a deep breath. "Ready," we said together. And we walked inside to face whatever came next. Meridian was exactly as pretentious as I remembered from the one time I'd been here. A corporate anniversary party for a client who'd insisted on celebrating in style. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, all floor-to-ceiling windows and ambient lighting designed to make everyone look younger and richer than they actually were. The tables were separated by careful distances that suggested privacy, while allowing just enough proximity for diners to notice who else was important enough to be there. The hostess, a woman whose ace was impossible to determine and whose smile was professionally warm in the way that suggested extensive customer service training, greeted us with the kind of deference usually reserved for people who tipped in 3 figures. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "We're meeting the Marcus Hayes party," Sarah said smoothly. "Private dining room." Recognition flickered across the hostess's face. "Of course. Mr. Hayes arrived a few minutes ago. Right this way, please." We followed her through the main dining room, past tables of people eating food that looked more like art installations than meals, past a wine display that probably cost more than my car, to a hallway that led to the private rooms. My mother's hand found my arm, gripped tight. "Breathe," I whispered. "We've got this." "Your father and I celebrated our 20th anniversary at a Cracker Barrel," she whispered back. This is something else entirely." Sarah heard and glanced back, giving Mom a reassuring smile. "The sea bass is excellent, but honestly, the portions are tiny. We'll probably need to stop for burgers on the way home." Despite everything, Mom smiled. The hostess opened a door to reveal a private dining room that could have seated 12, but was set for 5. The table was positioned by a window that looked out over the city, lights spreading out like a circuit board, streets organizing themselves into grids and patterns. It was the kind of view you paid for, the kind that was meant to remind you how high you'd climbed. Marcus stood when we entered. He'd changed since the funeral, or rather, he'd upgraded. The suit was different, charcoal instead of gray. Probably switched out because the first one had gotten rain-spotted. His hair was perfectly styled. His watch caught the ambient light. He looked like a man who belonged in rooms like this, who moved through expensive spaces with the ease of someone for whom money had stopped being a concern years ago. Emma stood beside him, and I realized I'd been deliberately not looking at her. Forcing myself to look now, I saw she'd also upgraded. A cream-colored dress that probably had a designer name I wouldn't recognize. Subtle jewelry that was probably not subtle at all if you knew about such things. Makeup applied with the kind of precision that suggested professional help. They looked like a power couple from a magazine spread, the kind of couple other people aspired to be. "Dan," Marcus said, his voice carefully modulated to sound pleased, but not overeager. "Sarah, Mom, thank you for coming." He moved to hug our mother, but she stepped back slightly, the movement small but unmistakable. "Marcus," she said, her voice neutral. Nothing more. I watched something flicker across his face. Hurt, maybe, or annoyance carefully masked. He recovered quickly, turning to Sarah with an extended hand. "Dr. Chen, it's good to see you again under better circumstances." "Sarah, please," she said, shaking his hand briefly. And I'm not sure any circumstances involving a family dinner this staged can be called better, but I appreciate the sentiment. Direct hit. Marcus's smile tightened fractionally. Emma stepped forward then, and I made myself look at her fully for the first time since the funeral. Up close. I could see the fine lines that even expensive makeup couldn't quite hide, the slight tightness around her eyes that suggested she wasn't sleeping well. The way her smile didn't quite reach those eyes. "Daniel," she said softly, "thank you for agreeing to this. I know it can't be easy." Emma. I didn't offer a hug or a handshake, just her name, just acknowledgement. We stood there in awkward silence until Sarah moved to the table. "Should we sit?" she suggested. "I believe we have a lot to discuss." She positioned herself strategically, taking the seat that put her back to the window, which meant Marcus and Emma would be backlit, slightly harder to read. Mom sat beside Sarah, which put her opposite Marcus. I took the remaining seat, forming a triangle where Sarah and I flanked my mother. Marcus noticed the positioning. I saw him notice, but said nothing. He and Emma took their seats across from us, and for a moment, we just sat there. 5 people around a table set for confrontation disguised as dinner. A waiter appeared as if summoned by telepathy, young, professionally invisible in the way good waitstaff are. "Good evening. May I start you with something to drink?" Marcus ordered a bottle of wine I didn't recognize, but whose price I could guess at. Sarah ordered sparkling water. Mom asked for tea. I seconded the sparkling water, and Emma requested white wine. When the waiter departed, Sarah pulled out her phone and set it on the table, screen up. "Before we begin," she said calmly, "I'm going to start recording now. As we discussed, this conversation will be documented for clarity and future reference. Does anyone object?" "No objection," Marcus said. He produced his own phone, placed it beside hers. "I'll be recording as well, for the same reasons." "Understood," Sarah said. She tapped her screen. Recording started. Today is Tuesday, November 19th, approximately 7:15 p.m. Present are Sarah Chen, Daniel Hayes, Martha Hayes, Marcus Hayes, and Emma Hayes. This is a voluntary conversation to discuss family relationships and establish boundaries going forward. All parties have consented to being recorded. It was so clinical, so professional, that it made the whole situation feel surreal, like we were deposing witnesses rather than having a family dinner. Marcus shifted in his seat. "I appreciate everyone being willing to do this. I know the funeral was difficult for all of us, and I think some things were said or implied that need to be addressed." "By you?" Mom asked quietly. "Or by Emma?" Emma flushed. "Mrs. Hayes." "It's Martha," Mom interrupted. "You were engaged to my son for 2 years. I think you can use my first name, even if you did leave him for my other son." The words hung in the air like smoke. Emma's flush deepened. Marcus reached for her hand across the table. "Mom," Marcus said, "that's not fair. What happened between Emma and Dan was 7 years ago. People grow. People change. We're not here to relitigate ancient history." "Ancient history," I repeated. "Is that what you call it? What would you call it, Dan?" I considered my words carefully. I'd call it a pattern of you deciding that what you wanted was more important than who you hurt getting it. "That's not—" Marcus stopped himself, visibly restraining whatever he'd been about to say. "Look, I know I haven't been the best brother. I know I pulled away from the family. I know I missed things I should have been there for, and I'm sorry for that. I genuinely am." "Are you sorry you married Emma?" I asked bluntly. "Or just sorry you got caught looking bad at Dad's funeral?" Emma made a small sound, distress or anger, I couldn't tell. The drinks arrived then, providing a momentary interruption. The waiter poured wine with exaggerated care, distributed waters and tea, explained the evening's specials in a tone that suggested they were describing religious artifacts rather than food. We ordered, mostly at random, I think, none of us really caring what we ate. When he left, Sarah spoke. "Let's establish some ground rules for this conversation," she said. "First, we're not here to relitigate the past. What happened 7 years ago happened. We all know what happened. We all have our perspectives on it. There's no point in arguing about who was right or wrong." "Agreed," Marcus said quickly. "Second," Sarah continued, "we're here to determine if there's a path forward. If the four of you," she gestured around the table, excluding herself deliberately, "can have some kind of functional family relationship, that's the question we're here to answer." "That's what we want too," Emma said, speaking for the first time in minutes. "A path forward. A way to move past all of this." "Why?" I asked. "Why now? 7 years, Emma. 7 years of nothing. No calls, no messages, no acknowledgement that I existed. And then you show up at my father's funeral and try to gloat about winning. So why the sudden interest in reconciliation?" She looked at Marcus as if for permission to speak. He nodded slightly. "Because I was wrong," she said quietly. "About a lot of things. About what mattered. About what I wanted." She twisted her wine glass, watching the light refract through it. "I saw you at the funeral. Saw you with Sarah. And I realized," her voice caught, "I realized I'd traded something real for something that just looked good." "That's very poetic," Sarah said, her tone neutral. "But it doesn't answer Daniel's question. Why now? What specifically prompted this revelation?" Emma's eyes flicked to her, defensive, wary. "Does there have to be a specific trigger? Can't someone just realize they made a mistake?" "They can," Sarah agreed, "but usually there's a catalyst. Usually something happens that forces that realization, so I'm asking, what happened?" Silence. Marcus and Emma exchanged a look. "We're having some difficulties," Marcus said finally. "In the business. Nothing catastrophic, but challenging. And it's made us reevaluate our priorities. Made us realize that we'd isolated ourselves from family, from the people who matter. We don't want to continue down that path." "What kind of difficulties?" Sarah asked. "That's not really," Marcus began. "If you want a relationship with Daniel and Martha," Sarah interrupted smoothly, "then you don't get to partition information. You don't get to decide what's relevant and what isn't. Either we have an honest conversation or we don't have one at all." Mom was watching Sarah with something like awe. I felt the same way. This was Sarah in her element, precise, analytical, unintimidated by Marcus's power plays. Marcus's jaw tightened. "One of our major investments went south. A company we'd put significant capital into. It turned out the financials were fraudulent. We're facing potential losses in the 8-figure range, plus possible legal complications for not having done adequate due diligence." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and found I meant it. Not because I cared about Marcus's money, but because I could see the stress it was causing him, could see it in the tightness of his shoulders, the slight circles under his eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. "It's made us reassess," Emma added. "Made us realize that we'd been so focused on success, on building wealth, on winning, that we'd lost sight of what actually matters." "And what actually matters?" Mom asked. "Family," Emma said. "Connection. Having people in your life who care about you for who you are, not what you have." "That's very enlightening," Mom said dryly. "It's just fascinating that this realization came right after you lost money and right after you discovered Daniel had married someone successful. What a coincidence." "Mom," Marcus said sharply, "we're not here because of Sarah's success. We're here because we want to repair our family." Then why did your email to Daniel specifically mention Sarah's company? I asked. Why did you say there were things he should know about her? Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. I phrased that badly. I was concerned, as your brother, that you might not have all the information about the acquisition. The biotech space is complicated, and I wanted to make sure you understood the implications of what? Sarah asked, her voice sharp for the first time. Of being married to someone successful, of being married to someone who built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Please, Marcus, enlighten us about these implications Daniel might not understand. I just meant that acquisitions like yours often have complications, earn-out provisions, non-compete clauses, restrictions on what you can do next. I wanted to make sure Dan understood that your financial situation might not be as straightforward as it appears. My financial situation is none of your concern, Sarah said flatly, and suggesting that Daniel needs you to explain his own wife's business to him is both insulting to him and presumptuous of you. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it, Marcus? I asked, because it sounds a lot like you wanted to plant doubt. Make me question Sarah, question our relationship, question whether I really understood what I'd gotten myself into. Does that about cover it? The appetizers arrived, providing another interruption. Tiny portions of things arranged like abstract art. No one touched them. Okay, Marcus said when the waiter left. Okay, you're right. I wanted to understand how you'd ended up with someone like Sarah. Not because I thought there was anything wrong with it, but because He paused, and for the first time, I saw something genuine flicker across his face. I was jealous, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I was jealous that my little brother, who I'd written off as someone who'd never amount to much, had ended up with someone more successful than my wife. Than me. The admission hung in the air. There it is, Sarah said softly. The truth. Finally. Emma was staring at her plate. We made mistakes, she said. Both of us. We chose money over people. We chose success over relationships. And now, her voice wavered, now we're facing the consequences of those choices. Marcus's business is struggling. My career never went anywhere. I'm still at the same community paper, still writing about zoning board meetings and high school sports. We have money, but we don't have much else. And you think coming back into our lives will fix that? Mom asked, not unkindly. You think admitting you made mistakes erases the hurt you caused? No, Marcus said. No, we know it doesn't. But we're hoping we can start to make amends, start to rebuild some kind of relationship, even if it's not what it was before. I looked at him across the table. This man who'd once been my big brother, my hero, the person I'd wanted to be like. And I tried to see that person in the successful, stressed, slightly desperate man sitting across from me. What do you actually want from us, Marcus? I asked. Specifically, not vague statements about family and reconciliation. What do you want? He met my eyes. Honestly, I want a relationship with my brother again. I want to be able to call you on your birthday, come to family dinners, know what's happening in your life. And yes, he glanced at Sarah. Yes, I was hoping that maybe, if we could repair things between us, there might be opportunities to work together, to collaborate. My fund is looking at the biotech space, and having someone with Sarah's expertise and connections would be... There it is, I said. The real reason. It's not the only reason. But it's a reason, Sarah said. A significant one. You're not just here for family reconciliation. You're here because you see me as a business opportunity, as a potential asset. That's not... Marcus stopped, sighed. Okay, yes, that's part of it. But can't it be both? Can't I want to repair my relationship with my brother and also see potential for professional collaboration? No, I said flatly. Not with our history, not after what you did. You don't get to swoop back into my life, admit you were jealous and wrong, and then immediately try to monetize my wife's success. Dan, I'm not finished. I leaned forward. You asked what I wanted to call what happened 7 years ago. Here's what I call it. You saw something I had, Emma, and you decided you wanted it more than you cared about me. You pursued her. You took her. You married her. And you never once apologized or even acknowledged how much that hurt me. I'm apologizing now. 7 years too late, and only because your business is struggling and you want access to Sarah's network. I sat back. So no, Marcus, we can't have a relationship that's both personal and professional. We can't repair our family while you're trying to figure out how to use my wife's connections. You have to choose. Silence fell over the table. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade. And if I choose family, Marcus asked quietly, if I agree to keep business completely separate, to never ask Sarah for introductions or connections, to just be your brother again, is that possible? I looked at my mother, at Sarah, at Emma, who was crying silently into her napkin. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if we can get that back, but we can't even try while you're still seeing us as opportunities instead of people. Marcus nodded slowly. He looked defeated in a way I'd never seen him look before. Okay, he said. Okay, then I choose family. No business, no networking, no using Sarah's connections, just trying to be a better brother, a better son. We'll see, Mom said. Words are easy, Marcus. We'll see what your actions show us. The main courses arrived, and we ate in heavy silence, the food tasteless despite probably being exceptional. The recording devices sat between us like judges, documenting everything, and I wondered if this was healing or just a different kind of wound. We made it through the main course, in a silence that felt like holding your breath underwater. Not quite peaceful, not quite suffocating, but somewhere uncomfortably in between. Emma had stopped crying, but hadn't started eating. She pushed an expensive piece of halibut around her plate, creating patterns in the sauce that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce. Marcus ate mechanically, the way you do when food is fuel rather than pleasure. Mom picked at her meal with the careful precision of someone who was raised to never waste food but couldn't quite stomach what was in front of her. Sarah ate normally, which somehow made her seem even more composed than everyone else. Like this was just another business dinner, another negotiation, another situation to be managed with grace and strategy. I was halfway through my steak when Emma spoke. I need to say something. We all looked at her. She'd set down her fork, was gripping her napkin like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Emma, Marcus started, a warning in his tone. No, I need to say this. She looked at me directly for the first time all evening. Daniel, I need you to know that leaving you wasn't just about money. That's what I told myself. That's what I told everyone. But it wasn't the truth. Emma, we don't need to do this now, Marcus said, his voice tight. Yes, we do. She turned to him. We came here to be honest, to try to make amends. How can we do that if I'm still lying about what actually happened? I felt Sarah's hand find mine under the table, squeeze gently, grounding me. What are you talking about? I asked. Emma took a shaky breath. I was already seeing Marcus before I left you. For 3 months. We were having an affair. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling out in waves. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. You what? We were having an affair, Emma repeated, her voice stronger now, like confession was giving her courage. It started at a charity event Marcus invited me to. He said you were too busy with work, that you wouldn't mind if he took me instead, since you'd already declined. And I went, and it was everything I'd imagined my life could be. The people, the venue, the food, the conversations about art and travel and things that mattered. As opposed to the conversations you had with me? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the rage building in my chest. About what? Our small, insignificant lives? I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it, Emma? She flinched but continued. That night, after the event, Marcus and I went for drinks. Just drinks. And we talked for hours. About his work, about my frustrations with my career, about our childhoods, about everything. And he understood. He understood my ambition in a way you never did. Because I wasn't ambitious enough, I said flatly. Because I was happy building a modest business, helping small companies, instead of chasing millions. Yes, she said simply. Yes. And I know how that sounds. I know it makes me shallow and materialistic and everything you probably think I am. But I wanted more, Daniel. I wanted to travel first class and eat at restaurants like this and not have to check my bank account before buying a new dress. I wanted to matter. And you didn't matter with me. I didn't matter to myself, she corrected. That's what I've realized over the past 7 years. I didn't love myself enough to be content with a good life. I needed an extraordinary life to feel valuable. And Marcus offered that. Marcus had gone very still, his face carefully neutral. So you had an affair, I said. For 3 months, while wearing my engagement ring, while planning our wedding, while sleeping in my bed. Yes, Emma whispered. And the day you packed your bags, I'd already decided. Marcus had asked me to choose, him or you, the life I wanted or the life I had. Her voice broke. And I chose him. I looked at Marcus. Did you know I was calling you that whole time? Asking for advice about getting Emma back? Did you know I was falling apart while you were... I couldn't finish the sentence. Yes, Marcus said quietly. I knew, and I let you suffer. I let you think it was your fault, that you weren't enough, that if you just tried harder or made more money or were different somehow, she'd come back. He met my eyes. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. I know that. But I am. I'm sorry for all of it. Mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Martha, Marcus started. Don't. Her voice was shaking with rage. Don't you dare speak to me right now. You stood by and watched your brother destroy himself over a woman you were sleeping with. You let him blame himself for your betrayal. You let him think he'd failed when you were the one who... She stopped, breathing hard. Your father never knew this, never knew how deep your cruelty went. And I'm grateful for that. Grateful he died, still believing his son had at least some shred of decency. Mom, please. I need air, she said. I need to not be in this room right now. She walked out and I started to follow, but Sarah's hand on my arm stopped me. Let me, she said softly. You need to finish this. She left, and then it was just the three of us, me, Marcus, and Emma, sitting around a table full of half-eaten expensive food and exposed truths. Why are you telling me this now? I asked Emma. Why not just keep lying? I believed the story for 7 years. Why confess now? Because I'm pregnant, she said. The words hit like a physical blow. Congratulations, I managed. Don't, she said. Don't be kind about this. Don't be gracious. I don't deserve it. She was crying again, but harder now. I'm pregnant and I'm terrified because I'm looking at this life I've built with Marcus, this expensive, hollow life, and I'm thinking about bringing a child into it. And I realized I don't want my kid to grow up thinking that success means money and status and choosing the highest bidder. I don't want them to become someone like you, I supplied. Yes, someone like me. Someone who destroys good people in pursuit of something that doesn't actually make them happy. She wiped her eyes, smearing her expensive makeup. I'm miserable, Daniel. I have been for years, and I kept telling myself it was worth it, that the money and the lifestyle made up for the guilt and the emptiness. But it doesn't. It never did. I looked at Marcus. Did you know she was going to say all this? No, he said. We agreed to apologize, to try to make amends, but this... He looked at Emma like he was seeing a stranger. This wasn't part of the plan. There's always a plan with you, I said, and always an agenda. Even coming here tonight, you had goals, outcomes you wanted, ways you were going to manipulate the conversation to get what you needed. Yes, he admitted. I did. But you're right. That's the problem. I'm so used to strategizing and optimizing and finding angles that I forgot how to just be honest, how to just be a person instead of a chess player. Why? I asked. Why did you become like this? We were raised the same way, same parents, same values, same opportunities. What happened to you? Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller, more vulnerable than I'd heard it in years. I was 12, he said. Do you remember the science fair, 7th grade? I searched my memory. Vaguely. You did something with solar energy. I built a solar panel from scratch, spent 3 months on it, worked with Dad every weekend. It was good, really good. I thought I might actually win. He smiled bitterly. I got 3rd place, and the kid who won first, his dad was a patent attorney who basically built the whole project for him. Everyone knew it. But he had the right connections, the right presentation, the right story. Okay, I said, not understanding where this was going. And I remember standing there with my 3rd place ribbon, watching this kid accept 1st place for work he didn't do and thinking, that's how the world works. It's not about being the best. It's about knowing the right people and having the right resources and telling the right story. He looked down at his hands. And I decided that day that I wasn't going to be the person with the better project who lost. I was going to be the person with the connections and the resources and the winning story. So you became exactly what you hated, I said. Yes, exactly what I hated. And by the time I realized what I'd become, I was too invested to change, too successful by the only metrics I'd taught myself to value: money, status, power. He laughed hollowly. Dad used to tell me that success was making a difference in people's lives, teaching them something they didn't know, helping them become better versions of themselves. And I thought he was naive, thought he'd settled for less than he could have had. He chose what he wanted, I said. That's not settling. That's knowing yourself. I know that now. Now that he's dead, and I can't tell him he was right. Marcus's voice cracked. The last conversation I had with him, do you know what it was about? I shook my head. He called to tell me about a former student who'd just gotten into MIT. He was so proud, so excited, and I was in a meeting, so I cut him off. Told him I'd call him back later. I never did. He pressed his palms against his eyes. I never called him back. And 3 weeks later, he was dead. The silence that followed was different than the others, heavier, sadder, more honest. I'm not telling you this for sympathy, Marcus continued. I'm telling you so you understand that I know I failed. As a son, as a brother, as a person, I know the life I chose came at a cost I didn't fully understand until it was too late. And now I'm sitting here, about to become a father, and I have no idea how to be one. Because my own father was right there, being the best example I could have asked for, and I ignored him because he wasn't rich enough to matter. He mattered, I said quietly, to a lot of people, just not the people you cared about impressing. I know. God, I know. He looked at me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I want it, because I'm not sure I deserve to feel better about what I've done. But I needed you to know that I understand the magnitude of what I took from you, not just Emma, though that was unforgivable, but years. I took years where you could have moved on, found someone sooner, been happy instead of broken. I did that. And I'm sorry. Emma was openly sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. I loved you, I said to her. Did you know that? Really, genuinely loved you. Not for who I wanted you to be or what you could give me, just for who you were, or who I thought you were. I know, she choked out. I knew then, and I know now, and I threw it away for this, for money and status, and a man who, she looked at Marcus, a man I don't even think I love. Not really. Not the way you love me. Marcus flinched but didn't argue. Do you love him? I asked her. She was quiet for a long time. I don't know. I think I love the idea of him, the life he represents. But the person? I'm not sure I ever got to know the person. We're business partners who share a bed. We're co-conspirators in a life that looks perfect from the outside. But love? She shook her head. I don't know what that word means anymore. I thought about Sarah, about the way she held me when I cried about my father, the way she read skill documentation before writing code because she wanted to do things right, the way she made coffee every morning exactly how I liked it, even though she preferred tea, the way she'd walked into this dinner knowing it might be painful and stood beside me anyway. That was love. That was what the word meant. I feel sorry for you, I said to Emma, and realized I meant it. Both of you. You got exactly what you wanted and discovered it wasn't enough. That's a special kind of hell. It is, Marcus agreed. Every day, knowing we hurt you for something that ultimately made us miserable. The door opened, and Sarah returned with my mother. Mom's eyes were red, but she looked calmer, more composed. Did I miss anything? Sarah asked, though her tone suggested she'd been listening from outside. Just the part where they admitted they'd been having an affair since before Emma left me, I said, and the part where Emma's pregnant and questioning all her life choices, and the part where Marcus realized he destroyed his relationship with our father, chasing a version of success that made him miserable, so, the usual family dinner revelations. Sarah sat down beside me, her hand immediately finding mine. Mom took her seat more slowly, looking at Marcus and Emma with an expression I couldn't quite read. I think, Sarah said carefully, that we've established several things tonight. First, there was significant dishonesty in the past that went beyond what Daniel knew. Second, Marcus and Emma are experiencing consequences of their choices and appear to have genuine regret. Third, they're about to become parents, which is complicating their emotional state. Very clinical summary, Marcus said. I'm a scientist. Clinical is what I do. Sarah's voice was kind but firm. The question is, where do we go from here? Because confession is important, but it's not the same as reconciliation. And reconciliation requires more than just admitting you were wrong. It requires demonstrable change over time. What are you suggesting? Emma asked. I'm suggesting that tonight was a start, an honest start, which is more than I expected. Sarah looked at Marcus. But it can't be the end. You can't confess everything, cry, apologize, and expect immediate restoration of relationship. That's not how trust is rebuilt. What do we have to do? Marcus asked. You have to show us, over time, that you've changed, that you mean what you say, that you're willing to do the hard work of becoming the person you claim you want to be. She paused. And you have to accept that even if you do all that, Daniel and Martha might still choose to keep you at a distance. That's their right. You hurt them deeply. They don't owe you forgiveness just because you're sorry. I understand, Marcus said. Do you? Mom asked, speaking for the first time since returning. Because I'm not sure you do. I'm not sure you understand that your father died thinking you'd chosen money over family, that Daniel spent years in therapy working through what you did to him, that you don't get to snap your fingers and have it all back just because you finally realized you were wrong. I don't expect to have it all back, Marcus said. I want the chance to try, to prove I can be better. Mom looked at me. What do you want, Daniel? I thought about it. Thought about the brother I'd had before money and ambition had changed him. thought about whether that person still existed somewhere under the expensive suit and practiced charm. I want space, I said finally. I want time to process all of this. I want to see if your actions match your words. And I want you to understand that I have a life now, a good life, with Sarah. And I'm not going to let you disrupt that just because you're suddenly interested in family again. That's fair, Marcus said. Is it? I asked. Because fair would have been you making different choices 7 years ago. This isn't fair. This is me being more generous than you deserve because Mom raised me to give people second chances. Third chances, Emma said quietly. This is at least your third chance with me. Then don't waste it, I said. The waiter appeared then, asking about dessert with the carefully neutral expression of someone who'd definitely noticed the crying and tension but was professionally obligated to pretend they hadn't. Just the check, please, Marcus said. I'll get my own, I said immediately. Dan, I'll get my own check, Marcus. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was a conversation, and I pay for my own conversations. He nodded, understanding. Okay, separate checks. We waited in awkward silence while the waiter processed our cards. I noticed Sarah hadn't ordered much. She'd been right about the portions being tiny. We definitely need burgers later. When the receipts came, we all signed in silence. The recording devices were still running, documenting even this mundane final act. Sarah stopped her recording first. End of recording. November 19th, 8:47 p.m. Thank you all for your honesty tonight. Marcus stopped his. Same. Thank you for listening, for giving us this chance. We stood, gathered our coats, prepared to leave. At the door to the private room, Emma caught my arm. Daniel, she said softly, I meant what I said. I'm sorry. For all of it. And I hope you're happy. With Sarah. I hope you found what I was too broken to give you. I did, I said. But not because you were broken. Because we wanted different things. And that's okay. People are allowed to want different things. Even if wanting those things hurts people, even then, but they have to own the consequences. She nodded, released my arm. I'll try, to be better, for the baby, if nothing else. Good luck, I said, and meant it. We left separately, them to the valet, us to the parking garage, where my Honda waited among the BMWs and Mercedes. In the car, the three of us sat in silence for a long moment. Well, Mom said finally, that was something. That's one word for it, I agreed. Burgers? Sarah suggested. God, yes, Mom and I said in unison, and we drove away from Meridian, from Marcus and Emma, from confessions and recordings and expensive truths, toward something simpler, something real. The burger place Sarah chose was the opposite of Meridian in every conceivable way. It occupied a converted gas station on the edge of town, all neon signs and vintage Coca-Cola memorabilia, and a jukebox that actually worked. The booths were red vinyl, held together with duct tape. The menu was laminated and sticky. The floor had seen better decades. And the burgers, God, the burgers were perfect. We slid into a booth near the back, as far from the handful of other late-night diners as possible. A waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the building was actually a gas station came over, order pad ready. What can I get you folks? 3 cheeseburgers, 3 fries, 3 chocolate shakes, Sarah said without consulting us. And keep the coffee coming. The waitress raised an eyebrow. It was nearly 9 p.m., a bit late for coffee, but just nodded. You got it, hun. When she left, Mom let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her bones. I need a minute, she said. I need a minute before we talk about what just happened, because if I start talking now, I'm going to start screaming, and these nice people don't deserve that. Take your time, Sarah said gently. We sat in silence while the waitress brought coffee and shakes. Mom wrapped her hands around her mug, staring into it like it held answers. I sipped my shake, thick enough that the straw stood up by itself, sweet enough to cut through the bitter taste the evening had left, and tried to organize my thoughts, tried to separate what I felt from what I should feel from what I was supposed to feel. An affair, Mom said finally. 3 months, while you were planning a wedding. Yeah, I said, and Marcus knew you were calling him, asking for advice, falling apart. And he said nothing. Yeah. She took a long drink of coffee, set the mug down with deliberate care, like she was afraid if she moved too quickly she'd throw it. I raised them the same, she said, and her voice was breaking. I gave them the same love, the same attention, the same values. Your father and I, we tried so hard to make sure they both knew they were valued, that success wasn't about money, that character mattered more than status. And somehow one of them became you and the other became... She couldn't finish. It's not your fault, Mom, I said. Isn't it? Somewhere along the way, Marcus learned that people were disposable, that relationships were transactions, that winning mattered more than honesty. He learned that from somewhere. He learned it from the world, Sarah said, not from you. The world is full of messages about success and money and power, about climbing ladders and crushing competitors. Martha, you and Jack taught them about kindness and integrity, but Marcus chose to listen to different teachers. But why? Mom asked, and she was crying now, tears running down her face into her coffee. Why did he choose that? What did we do wrong? I moved to sit beside her, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. You didn't do anything wrong. Marcus made his choices, just like I made mine. We had the same foundation and we built different lives on it. That's not your failure. That's just how people work. Your father would be heartbroken, she whispered. If he knew about the affair, about Marcus watching you suffer while he, God, it would have killed him. Maybe that's a mercy, I said, that he didn't know, that he died still believing his sons were better than that. The burgers arrived, and we ate mechanically, fuel more than enjoyment. The food was good, objectively probably better than the expensive meal at Meridian, but everything tasted like cardboard through the fog of emotional exhaustion. Halfway through her burger, Sarah spoke. I want to say something, and I need you both to hear me out before you react. We looked at her. I believe them, she said. Marcus and Emma. I believe they're genuinely sorry. I believe they're genuinely miserable. I believe they've realized they made terrible choices and destroyed good things in pursuit of shallow goals. But, I prompted, because I could hear the but coming. But that doesn't mean you have to forgive them. It doesn't mean you have to let them back into your lives. Their regret is their problem to deal with. Their misery is their consequence to bear. You don't owe them redemption just because they finally figured out they were wrong. Mom was nodding. I agree. But there's another but, I observed. But they're about to be parents, Mom continued, and that child, my grandchild, doesn't deserve to be punished for their parents' mistakes. That baby didn't ask to be born into this mess. I hadn't thought about that, about the fact that Marcus's child would be my niece or nephew, would be Mom's grandchild, would be part of our family whether we wanted them to be or not. So what are you saying? I asked. That we have to reconcile for the baby's sake? No, Mom said firmly. Not reconcile. But maybe we keep a door open, not wide open, not an invitation to waltz back into our lives, but open enough that when that child is born, they have the option of knowing their uncle, their grandmother, their family beyond just Marcus and Emma. That's generous, Sarah said, more generous than they deserve. It's not for them, Mom said. It's for the baby. Children need family, need people who love them unconditionally, who'll be there when their parents fail them. And let's face it, Marcus and Emma will fail them sometimes. All parents do. But it's better if there are other people who can step in, who can provide stability and love and perspective. I thought about my own childhood, about having my father's steady presence when Marcus was being difficult, about having Mom's wisdom when I was struggling, about the safety net of extended family, aunts and uncles and grandparents who made me feel valued even when I felt lost. "You're right," I said. "The baby deserves better than being caught in the middle of our mess." "So what does that look like?" Sarah asked. "Practically speaking?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never done this before. Never had to figure out how to maintain boundaries with someone while also staying available for their child." "We figure it out as we go," Mom said. "We start with very clear boundaries. Marcus and Emma don't get unrestricted access. They don't get to show up whenever they want or make demands. But when the baby is born, we meet them. We acknowledge them. We make it clear that we're there for that child, even if we're not there for them." "What if they use the baby to manipulate us?" I asked. "What if they use access to their child as leverage to force a boy relationship?" "Then we walk away," Sarah said. "There's a difference between being available for a child and being manipulated through a child. If they try to weaponize that baby, we cut contact completely." "Agreed," Mom said. "I won't let them use my grandchild as a bargaining chip." We finished our burgers in contemplative silence. The jukebox was playing something from the 70s, a song about love and loss that felt inappropriately on the nose. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Sarah. "And I need you to be completely honest." "Always," she said. "Are you okay with all of this? With me potentially maintaining some kind of relationship with Marcus and Emma? With their child being part of our extended family? Because you didn't sign up for this level of complicated when you married me." She looked at me with those steady eyes that had first made me trust her. "Daniel, I married you knowing you had a complicated family history. I married you knowing your brother had betrayed you and your ex-fiancé had destroyed you. I married you knowing all of that might resurface someday." She took my hand. "I didn't marry you despite your complications. I married you, complications included, because that's what love is. It's choosing someone, whole and complete, mess and all. Even when the mess includes a manipulative brother and his pregnant wife who used to be my fiancé. Even then," she smiled. "Though I reserve the right to be strategic about how we handle them, my generosity has limits." "Noted," I said. Mom was watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What?" I asked. "Your father and I used to have conversations like this," she said, "about how to handle difficult family members, difficult situations. We'd sit at the kitchen table with coffee, too much coffee, too late at night, and hash out strategies and boundaries and contingency plans." She smiled sadly. "I miss having that partnership. Having someone to navigate life's complications with." "You still have that," Sarah said gently. "With us. Different than having it with Jack, I know. But you're not navigating this alone." Mom's eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you, both of you, for including me in this, for not just making decisions and telling me after the fact, for treating me like I still have a say in my own family." "You're the matriarch," I said. "Of course you have a say, the most important say." "I'm not sure Marcus would agree with that assessment," she said dryly. "Marcus's opinion stopped mattering when he chose to prioritize everything except family," Sarah said. "He doesn't get to decide how this family operates anymore. You do." The waitress came by with the check, and I grabbed it before Marcus's ghost could somehow materialize and try to pay for our burgers too. We left a generous tip, the kind my father would have left, the kind that acknowledged the hard work of service industry jobs, and headed out into the night. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars belonging to the staff and the hardcore regulars who treated this place like a second home. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting everything in shades of red and blue. "I should get home," Mom said. It's been a long day, a long week, a long month, really. Do you want us to follow you? I offered. Make sure you get home safe. I've been driving home from places for 45 years, Daniel. I think I can manage. But her voice was gentle, appreciating the offer. Though maybe you could call me tomorrow. Let me know you're doing okay. I'll call, I promised. We hugged, long, tight, the kind of hug that communicated things words couldn't. Then she got into her car, and Sarah and I watched her drive away. How are you really doing? Sarah asked when we were alone. I thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm angry. At Marcus for the affair, at Emma for the lies, at both of them for wasting 7 years before telling me the truth. I'm sad for the relationship I thought I had with my brother, for the innocence I lost when I found out people I loved could betray me that deeply. I'm confused about what comes next, about whether forgiveness is even possible, about how to be an uncle to a child whose parents destroyed me. That's a lot of feelings, Sarah observed. Yeah, and under all of it, there's this weird sense of, I don't know, relief. Like, for 7 years I thought Emma left because I wasn't enough, wasn't successful enough, ambitious enough, good enough. And now I know it wasn't about me at all. It was about her, about Marcus, about their choices and their values and their willingness to hurt people to get what they wanted. That is a relief, Sarah said. A painful one, but still a relief. And there's gratitude, I continued. Gratitude that it happened. Because if it hadn't, I never would have met you, never would have become the person I needed to be to deserve someone like you. Emma leaving was the worst thing, and the best thing that ever happened to me. Life's funny that way, Sarah said. The worst moments often set up the best ones. They break you open so something better can get in. We stood there in the parking lot, holding hands, watching the occasional car pass on the street. What do you think they're doing right now? I asked. Marcus and Emma? Probably fighting, Sarah said. Emma just confessed to things Marcus didn't know she was going to confess. She went off script. People like Marcus hate it when things don't go according to plan. You think he's mad at her? I think he's probably scared. Scared that you'll never forgive them. Scared that his child will grow up knowing their father destroyed his own family. Scared that his business failures and personal failures are connected somehow. That his moral bankruptcy is manifesting in actual bankruptcy. You're probably right. I thought about Marcus's face when Emma had confessed about the affair. The shock, the betrayal, the irony of him feeling betrayed by someone betraying me with him. Do you think they love each other? Really? I think they love the idea of each other, Sarah said. They love the life they built together, the image they present. But actual love, the kind that survives hardship and requires sacrifice and puts the other person first. She shook her head. I don't think they know how to do that. I think they were so busy optimizing for success that they forgot to build an actual relationship. That's sad. It is, but it's also their choice. They chose status over substance, money over meaning, and now they're living with that choice. We got into my Honda, humble, practical, paid off, and started the drive home. Thank you, I said as we pulled out of the parking lot. For what? For being exactly who you are, for not being impressed by expensive restaurants or designer clothes, or people who think money equals worth. For choosing me when you could choose anyone. For, my voice caught, for making me believe I was worth choosing. You've always been worth choosing, Daniel. You just needed someone who could see it. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Though I appreciate the gratitude, it's nice to be appreciated for not being a gold digger. I laughed, despite everything. The bar is low. Disturbingly low, but we'll work with what we've got. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights giving way to suburban streets, then to our neighborhood with its modest houses and sensible cars and lives being lived at human scale. "What do we do tomorrow?" I asked as we pulled into our driveway. "About Marcus and Emma and all of it?" "Tomorrow we do nothing," Sarah said. "Tomorrow we let everything we learned tonight settle. We process. We feel our feelings. We don't make any decisions or commitments or plans. We just exist. Together. In our messy, complicated, beautiful life." "That sounds perfect," I said. Inside, our house was exactly as we left it, lived in, comfortable, real, no expensive art on the walls, no designer furniture that was more sculpture than seating. Just a home where two people loved each other and built a life one ordinary day at a time. Sarah made tea while I changed into comfortable clothes. We met on the couch, her feet in my lap, the television playing something mindless we weren't really watching. "Do you think Marcus will actually change?" I asked into the comfortable quiet. "I think he'll try," Sarah said, "for a while. But real change is hard. It requires consistently choosing difficulty over ease, honesty over convenience, principle over profit. Most people can do that for a few weeks, a few months if they're motivated. But years, a lifetime, that's rare." "So you think he'll go back to who he was?" "I think he'll probably find a middle ground. He'll be better than he was. Parenthood tends to do that to people, force them to think beyond themselves. But he'll never be the brother you had before he chose money over family. That person is gone." It hurt to hear, but I knew it was true. The Marcus I'd grown up with, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd defended me from bullies, who'd stayed up late helping me with homework. That Marcus had been replaced by someone else, someone harder, colder, more calculating. Maybe glimpses of the original remained. Maybe parenthood would bring more of them back. But the wholeness of who he'd been, that was lost. "I'm tired," I said, not just physically, though I was that too. Tired of the emotional weight, tired of processing betrayal, tired of trying to figure out what came next. "Then let's sleep," Sarah said. "Everything else can wait." We went to bed, and for the first time in days, I slept without dreaming, without noise, without anything but the simple peace of being home. 3 weeks passed before Marcus called again. 3 weeks of quiet, of normal life, of work and dinners and Sarah's acquisition meetings and evenings where the most dramatic thing that happened was debating what to watch on Netflix. 3 weeks where I didn't think about my brother or my ex-fiancée or recorded dinners or confessions. 3 weeks of healing I didn't know I needed. I was in the middle of debugging a client's inventory system when my phone rang. Unknown number, but local area code. I almost didn't answer. "Daniel Hayes." "Dan, it's Marcus." I sat back in my chair, felt my shoulders tense automatically. "Marcus, I know we said we'd give each other space, but Emma, the baby, there were complications. She's okay. The baby's okay, but we had a scare. And it made me realize that if something had happened, you wouldn't have known. Mom wouldn't have known. And that felt wrong. I processed this." "What kind of complications?" "Bleeding. She's on bed rest now, doctor's orders. Everything should be fine, but..." His voice cracked slightly. It was terrifying. Sitting in that hospital, not knowing if we were going to lose the baby, and realizing I had no one to call. No family to lean on because I'd destroyed all those relationships. "You could have called Mom," I said. "Could I? After everything? After what she said at the dinner?" He paused. I didn't think she'd want to hear from me. He was probably right. Mom had been clear about needing space, needing to see changed behavior over time before she was willing to engage again. "What do you want, Marcus? Permission to call Mom? I can't give you that. It's her decision." "No, I want..." He stopped, started again. I want to know what the boundaries are, what the rules are, because I meant what I said at dinner. I want to change. I want to be better. But I don't know how to do that when I don't know what's allowed. It was a fair question, and probably one I should have answered 3 weeks ago instead of just disappearing into silence. Hold on, I said. I need to call Sarah, bring her into this conversation. This affects her too. Okay. I conferenced Sarah in. She answered immediately. She always did when I called during work hours, knowing I wouldn't interrupt unless it mattered. Marcus wants to know what the boundaries are, I said without preamble. For moving forward. I thought we should establish them together. Good idea, Sarah said. Marcus, I'm here. Daniel has you on speaker. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for taking the time. How's Emma? Sarah asked, her voice professionally kind but not warm. Scared. Resting. The doctors think everything will be fine, but these next few weeks are critical. I'm glad she's okay, Sarah said, and I could tell she meant it. Whatever else Emma was, she didn't deserve pregnancy complications. So, boundaries. Daniel, you want to start? Or should I? You start, I said. You're better at this. Okay, Sarah's voice took on the tone she used for negotiations. Marcus, here's what we're willing to offer. Limited contact, primarily about family health issues or significant life events. No social visits, no dinners or casual hangouts, no requests for business introductions or networking. When the baby is born, we'll meet them once, assess the situation, and decide if ongoing contact makes sense. That's fair, Marcus said quietly. We're not finished, Sarah continued. Contact goes through Daniel only. You don't call me directly. You don't show up at my office or events. Daniel is the gatekeeper. If he says no to something, the answer is no. No arguing, no negotiating, no going around him to try to get to me or Martha. Understood. And everything significant gets documented, I added. Not recorded like the dinner, but notes, summaries. So there's no confusion later about what was said or promised. Like a paper trail, Marcus said. Exactly like a paper trail. I felt Sarah's influence in my own firmness, because we need to see consistent behavior over time. One good conversation doesn't erase 7 years of bad choices. Silence on the line. Then, how long? How long what? I asked. How long do I have to prove myself before things can be normal again? Sarah answered before I could. They're never going to be normal again, Marcus. Normal died when you pursued Daniel's fiancée. The best you can hope for is a different relationship. A more honest one, maybe. But not the old normal. Right. His voice was hollow. Right. I understand. Do you? I asked. Because you keep talking about reconciliation like it's a destination, like if you just behave well enough for long enough, everything goes back to how it was, but it doesn't work that way. Then how does it work? I thought about it. About my father. About trust. About the long, slow process of becoming someone different than you were. It works one choice at a time, I said. Every time you have an opportunity to be selfish, you choose generosity instead. Every time you could lie or obscure the truth, you choose honesty. Every time you could prioritize money or status or success, you choose people. And you do that consistently for years until choosing people becomes who you are instead of something you're trying to be. That's a long time. Yes, Sarah said simply. It is. But you didn't destroy these relationships overnight. You can't rebuild them overnight either. More silence. I could hear something in the background on Marcus's end, maybe Emma calling to him, maybe just the ambient noise of their expensive house. Okay, he said finally. Okay, I can do that. I will do that. We'll see, I said, not cruel, just honest. Actions, Marcus, not words. Show us. I will. And Dan, thank you for not just cutting me off completely, for giving me any chance at all. Thank you, Mom, for that, I said. And the baby. If it was just you, I probably would have walked away. I know I don't deserve this. No, I agreed. You don't, but maybe your kid does. Maybe they deserve an uncle who shows them what integrity looks like. They do, Marcus said quietly. They really do. We ended the call, and I sat there staring at my computer screen without seeing it. You okay? Sarah asked through the phone. I don't know. I feel like I should feel something more, vindicated or angry or satisfied, but I just feel tired. That's normal. Boundary setting is exhausting. I heard her typing in the background. But you did good. Clear, firm, fair. Your dad would be proud. You think? I know. He raised you to give people chances without being a doormat. That's exactly what you just did. I smiled despite the heaviness in my chest. I'll take it. Are we still on for dinner tonight? Absolutely. I'm making that pasta you like. The one with too much garlic? There's no such thing as too much garlic, Daniel. That's blasphemy. I laughed, and it felt good, felt normal. I love you, I said. I love you too. Now get back to work. Your clients need you. She hung up, and I turned back to my screen, back to inventory systems and code that made sense, back to a life that was mine, built on choices I was proud of. Marcus would either change or he wouldn't. Either way, I'd be fine, because I already had everything I needed. 6 months later, I held my nephew for the first time. His name was Jack, after our father. Marcus had called to ask permission, his voice uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. I'd said yes because some things transcend bitterness, and honoring our father was one of them. The hospital room was quiet. Just me, Sarah, and the baby. Marcus and Emma had stepped out, giving us space, respecting boundaries, doing what we'd asked. Small things. But they mattered. Jack was tiny, impossibly tiny. He had Marcus's nose and Emma's coloring, and absolutely no idea that his existence had complicated everything. He's beautiful, Sarah whispered beside me. Yeah, I agreed. He really is. The baby stirred, made a small sound, settled back into sleep. I marveled at the weight of him, the warmth, the absolute trust of a brand new person who didn't know yet that the world could be complicated. Mom appeared in the doorway, her face soft with wonder. Can I? She asked. I transferred Jack carefully into her arms. She held him like she'd done this before, which she had twice, with sons who'd grown into men she both loved and didn't always understand. Hello, Jack, she whispered to him. I'm your grandmother, and I loved your grandfather very much. He would have been so happy to meet you. My throat felt tight. Marcus returned then, hovering uncertainly at the door. Come in, Mom said. He's your son. Marcus approached slowly, like he wasn't sure he was allowed. In the 6 months since our boundary conversation, he'd been careful, respectful. He'd checked in monthly, just brief texts about Emma's pregnancy progress, never asking for more than we'd agreed to give. He'd shown up to Dad's memorial service that Mom had organized, sat in the back, left quietly, sent flowers, small things, consistent things. Thank you, he said quietly, for coming. For being here. He gestured helplessly at the baby, for giving him the chance to know you. We're not doing this for you, I said, but my voice was gentle. We're doing it for him. He deserves family. I know. But still, thank you. Emma appeared, looking exhausted and radiant in the way new mothers do. She saw us all gathered around her son and started crying. Sorry, she said, wiping her eyes. Hormones. Everything makes me cry now. It's okay, Sarah said. Tears are allowed. We stayed for an hour, held the baby, made small talk, navigated the strange space between estrangement and reconciliation that we'd been occupying for months. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't easy. But it was honest. As we prepared to leave, Marcus walked us to the elevator. "I know I don't get to ask for more than you're giving," he said, "but I hope someday Jack can really know his uncle, know the man his grandfather was proud of, know what integrity looks like." I looked at my brother, saw the expensive suit, the successful exterior, but also the fear in his eyes, the desperate hope of someone trying to be better than they'd been. "Maybe," I said, "if you keep choosing people over profit, family over status, truth over convenience." "I'm trying," Marcus said. "Every day, I'm trying." "I know," I said, and I did. I could see it in the small choices, the boundaries respected, the promises kept, the slow, difficult work of becoming someone different. "Keep trying," I said, "for Jack, for yourself." In the elevator, Sarah took my hand. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." We drove home through evening traffic, back to our modest house, our ordinary life, our choice to build something real instead of something that just looked impressive. That night, lying in bed, Sarah asked, "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive them?" I thought about it, about forgiveness and trust, and whether they were the same thing. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think I'm learning to hold space for both things, remembering what they did and acknowledging who they're trying to become. Maybe that's enough." "Maybe it is," Sarah agreed. Outside, the world kept turning. Marcus and Emma were learning to be parents. Mom was learning to be a widow and a grandmother, and I was learning that sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the best life. Not because the betrayal was good, but because survival teaches you who you really are. I'd survived Emma leaving. I'd survived Marcus's betrayal. I'd survived my father's death. And on the other side of survival, I'd found Sarah, found myself, found a life worth living. Emma had asked if she'd won, all those months ago at the funeral. But winning and losing were the wrong questions. The right question was, are you becoming who you want to be? And finally, after 7 years of doubt and pain and growth, I could answer yes. I was exactly who I wanted to be, and that was victory enough.